And we're back, hopefully. Welcome to Simply WoW Podcast. As always, again, I'm Meeps, joined by Rise.
Hey, how's it going?
And Jay.
What's up?
And this week, we're joined by another officer of Psi, Ganju. Say hi, Ganju.
Hello.
Awesome. This week we'll be...
opportunity to say hi, Ganju.
Oh,
Right.
hi, Ganju.
There you go.
It's too late. He already fucked it up.
Yeah.
No, we're shutting it down.
That's why we came
Again.
Yeah. And this week we'll be shifting the focus from our personal experiences in Guild and onto the future, Shadowlands. Last week we asked viewers to leave a comment on the question, what is the hardest thing you've had to do or deal with in a raiding guild? Ganju, you want to give us your answer before we move on to the featured comment?
Yeah, so when I first started playing WoW, a bunch of friends that we had met throughout the world, and a couple of real-life friends that had gotten me into the game, we all created a guild on Misha. It was called, oh god. Aftermath, thank you. I knew it was after something, for some reason.
We heard this part of the story already, so we're keen on the details.
We had all started a guild. We weren't hardcore raiders. We weren't anything. We were barely know what the hell we were doing, to be honest. And we cleared ICC 10-man somehow, some way. But as a couple months started going by while we were all waiting for Cataclysm to come out, one of our officers, her name was Jessica, I want to say it was her. There was another one. That was her actual in-game name, too. Had some sort of skin cancer, and she was always in the hospitals, things like that. Unfortunately, it made it to where she couldn't play anymore. And then we just started losing tanks. Everybody just kind of stopped dropping off. That was... And then the last few people that were actually still part of the guild, myself, one of my friends out in Texas, Merrick, shout out to him, if he even sees this ever, and Shade no longer plays, he does other things. We just decided to all kind of go our own ways, and that's basically at the time when I swapped over to Horde and transferred to
Good choice.
BlackRock. Yeah. Oh yeah, we were Alliance. I was a Dwarf Warrior.
Curious, what like time period was that in? Was that like in between expansion drought, or was that like middle of tier?
That was in between Wrath of the Lich King and Cataclysm. So, yeah, there was a lot of drop off there.
Yeah, that's really unfortunate.
Yep. Surprisingly, I still talk to Merrick every now and again. He calls me like maybe once in a blue moon. But
cool. As long as you can still have some replayability and some friend aspect with those old guildies, that's what's important.
Yeah, nobody of that guild that I know of plays anymore. But yeah, to me that was the hardest thing, was because they were all, my friends, my first friends that I made in World of Warcraft, as well as, a couple IRL friends that actually got me into the game. Just said no more. And here I am, 10 years later, 12 years later, still playing the pleb that I am.
I'm going to be more careful about the questions that I ask Nick right out the gate. Because that was pretty dark, man.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And then I'm over here trying not to smile because I'm reading chat and Jay's being ridiculous. All right. Well, so the feature comment from last week came from Cappy, and he said the hardest thing for him is not teaching or correcting people on picking strange things, doing such poor DPS just due to bad essences or talents, and his knowledge of the game helped him grow as a player, and it hurts seeing people shafted by poor choices. Which, on that, like, he streams a lot, and one of the things in his stream is ask me questions. Like, he's always wanting to help people that want to learn.
I actually resonate with that. I actually resonate with that same comment because when I was in Perdition and basically every single person there was a first time ever Mythic Raider, there were a lot of instances where it's like, why is someone doing no damage? And like the officer corps would like look at all of the talents and be like, oh, this person's doing all these things wrong. And then we had to kind of figure it out and like teach them. And that was always a really hard thing to like tell someone that they just weren't using the best options that were available. And like it felt really, really weird in that case. But yeah, I totally feel that comment actually.
But
I don't. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say I don't understand how people don't research ahead of time. They just kind of go in blindly, like they don't know what they're gonna play. They don't know
All right,
anything.
listen
about
here,
the deck.
Mr. Elitist. All right,
I'm
we
not
don't
being
all
elitist
have
on this,
like
right?
40
Just-
hours a day to like look at the best in slot for every little encounter. Like, look, all right. No, I agree with you 100%.
Just in terms of mythic rating, or even high end, any high end point of the game. Like if you're going into high mythic plus dungeons or you're doing high arena, you should do some research if you want to compete at that level.
Oh yeah. The one way that I can see that might happen though is, for example, if you're playing with the first tier of an expansion, you're playing with what's the best, and maybe you're too naive to look and see if something better has come up or if there's a different talent that should be better. Which, to be fair, you should be doing that information anyway if you're playing at a higher level, but I could see, like, in some instances where maybe that's the case. You stick with one thing that seems like it's the best, and then maybe something's just a little bit better and you don't want to switch because of the playstyle or whatever.
I think more than that, the issue is more than likely probably they went and saw a streamer, saw what the streamer was doing, found the build, and apply it for everything. And they don't think like, for example, like if you're a Shadow Priest and it's a single target fight, you don't take Misery because like you apply your dots once and you never need to reapply them again. So why would you want to apply Shadow Word Pain when you touch? It's much better to go Twist of Fate for that extra execute damage. Something like that people don't think of, but when there's a super multi-target fight, you don't care about execute damage because you want to dot as many things as possible. So they don't think about that. They just go, oh, that's the build. I'll just go with that. Change or adapt to the encounters.
Yeah, or something else that you like Fire Mage, the meta changed. You go with Kindling build now with full mastery rather than, the Meteor build with mastery.
Yeah, switches all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of what builds you're going to play, going into Shadowlands, what spec are you guys going to play? What role? What class?
Let me go
Ooh.
first.
All right,
ahead.
Jay.
All right, I'm going to be super long, in-depth Jay answer. You ready?
Okay, I'm gonna go to the bathroom then.
Yeah, I'll see you guys later.
Nap time.
I'm going to be playing a Brewmaster Monk, tanking.
Which is what brewmasters typically do.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, I
usually
mean, I
not that
wanted
great.
to specify, maybe I could heal or DPS. I don't know, but nah, I'm going to tank, and it's going to be a Brewmaster Monk. That's
Yeah,
my
I'm
answer.
playing a Mistweaver Monk DPS this expansion. It's gonna be really fun.
That's hot.
You make jokes, but in Hellfire Citadel, you could.
Okay. Fair.
That one tier. What about
Yes,
you, Gunju?
We can dream,
go ahead.
okay?
I'm going to be actually an Arcane Mage because Arcane is looking really good for, single target, and it's nice to actually have a little bit of more in-depth kind of gameplay with have the changes that they've made with Arcane Mage now, rather than it just being Arcane Blast
Okay.
and Warlock.
Oh, and Warlock. Which Warlock spec you thinking?
Either Destro and or Affliction,
Nice.
because I really love the playstyle of dots and keeping them up and all that stuff. I mean, I did Affliction and Old Deer with this, so I really loved it. And now that it's finally getting some love to be viable in M+, with Malefic Rupture being really nice and bursty for once, it's gonna be good. It's gonna be fun. I'm gonna hate myself because 2 characters first tier, but
Yeah, that's something that we're going to touch on later for sure.
Oh yeah, 100%. I'm in an awkward boat because Elemental Shaman is what I want to play. However, they have changed that class drastically about 4 times the last 3 weeks. So I'm really hesitant to see if it'll be tuned right. So I'm kind of crossing my fingers to see how Elemental will shape up at the end. And if not, I'm going to try my hardest to make a last-minute decision either between a Retribution Paladin or a Destro Warlock. But probably more towards the red.
warlock.
I mean, you've played Elemental
Dude,
Shaman.
looking at the Google Doc, though, we have got like 14 melee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's bad.
You've actually played Elemental Shaman even whenever it wasn't doing great, but you were able to, at the very least, keep pace with some of our better raiders.
I think it's just because I like Elemental Shaman enough. Like, I like their toolkit, and everything that I want in characters is exactly what they have. But if they take too hard of a hit, or if they dynamically change their playstyle, or if they're just really undertuned, I could still play it. But the other thing you have to keep in mind is, unfortunately, Elemental Shaman does not bring a lot in the terms of a toolkit or an advantage to a raid scenario right now. So that's something that I'll have to take in consideration instead of playing something like a Ret Paladin, which auras and blessing for healers is really big.
Well, you gotta. I mean, Wind Totem. You're getting Wind Fury Totem back. You're getting Mana Totem back.
I need a shaman in my group.
Wind
for
Fury
extra
Totem is actually only with enhancement, so I will not have the access to that. Wind Rush
Okay, yeah, pick a
Totem,
different
I
class.
still. Yeah, Wind Rush Totem I still have to talent into. I will get Manatite Totem and Healing Stream Totem, which will be cool little raid healing that I can just kind of drop and just go about my business. But I don't know. It's a really hard decision looking at other classes and thinking, why aren't I playing another class that's bringing so much to the table? But I think that's something we'll also get into a little bit more later.
Right.
Well, one thing that you can actually look at is, kind of like how Final Fantasy 14 plays, or 13, 14, I don't know, where they
14.
have hybrid classes or support classes where they deal damage, but
Like
they
the Bard.
also heal. Yeah, exactly, like a Bard or a Disc Priest in WoW right now, where their healing is damage. You could be mainly damaged, but still throw off heals every now and then, and be a battle shaman like you always wanted to be.
Yeah, that is something to seriously consider as well. Again, I'll have to put a lot of thought into it, but we'll see how it turns out. What about
I'll
you, Meeps?
summarize what's going on in Rise's brain, though, right now.
Yeah.
It's in response to Nick, what he's thinking is, yeah, but that's not optimal.
See.
Go ahead, Meeps.
I've had an identity crisis with Shadowlands so far, because I find enjoyment in so many specs that, play what you want to play really doesn't affect me. In the past, I've always fallen back on Hunter because Marksman Hunter has been my favorite, hands down. But since they added Rapid Fire, and Mark Shot's now mandatory, even though it's baseline now, it's too good not to use. But it's a GCD, it's just an obnoxious way to play. So now I'm completely lost at what I want to play more than anything else, because I like the challenge in a lot of things, except I've learned recently that I do not like casters. I do not like caster DPS. It's not the fact that you have to stand still and cast. It's not the immobility. It's the spell queuing. I have sat and wanted to pull my hair out whenever I'll be mashed, because I'm a masher. It's only because I mash buttons. So I'm ready, this spell's about to go off 0.2 seconds or whatever, so I'm mashing the next spell. Then I have a proc. Well, I don't want to cast the spell anymore. I want to cast my proc. Nope, too late. You are spell queued up. You can't cast your proc till after you cast this other spell, unless you cancel the spell that you're casting. It drives me.
In which case, that's usually a loss of DPS, isn't
Right.
that worth?
It drives me
rough.
bonkers. I have reasons. Yeah, so this is a recent thing of I really don't like casters, and because they all have this issue. So now I've been looking at melee or back to hunter or tank even. And right now I don't know. So I'm looking at Kitty, Warrior, and Pally. But then again, we've got about a dozen melee signed up for Shadowlands.
Yeah, that'd be pretty hard to fill in a slot that's not already taken by another priority role.
Yeah, so that's where I'm at with choosing a main. But what do you guys think about the specs that do not look appealing? What is something you absolutely refuse to play if your choice is to raid with us, but you have to play this spec? You say, no fucking way am I gonna raid.
Shadow Priest.
Shaman.
Attacked?
Good.
For me, me right now, I actually really don't have one. I think the only role that I wouldn't want to necessarily play is a dedicated healer. Whereas I'll always have my healer off specs or try to be, but I don't know. I think all the classes look fine to some degree, or at least I would be fine with playing really anything if I felt it was that appealing.
It's funny that Jay brought up Shadow Priest when, the majority of the Shadow Priest community is like, all hail Blizzard, you've done the right changes. Except Jay, he's like, no, you fucked it.
No.
You fucked the dog this time.
They killed my favorite class.
They have, but they haven't. They've killed it the way that I like to play it, and they are now giving it back and saying, this might be broken, this might not work, what do you think, and we might not keep it. Which I understand why they had to do it. I understand that it's a pain in the ass to balance, and I understand that, mechanically, it's a pain. It doesn't mean I have to like it. And I liked the ramping haste, you're fighting against this insanity, play style. I loved that. The high APM, it's good. It's good.
I don't understand why they decided to pull the rug out from underneath of the quote unquote good players that can do really well at Shadow Priest.
Because it's not accessible by everybody, and that's their point. They want every class to be accessible by everybody. They want, Joe Blow just starting the game to be able to pick Shadow Priest and not be completely overwhelmed. Whereas, Joe Blow just off the street, unless he's fucking good at games, will pick up Shadow Priest, get to 10 stacks in Void Form, and, his insanity is going to be like, oh, and he's going to be like, oh, I don't know what to do. Meanwhile, Cappy's at 50, and it's like, you miss one global, you're out.
Yeah.
And, and even me to a lesser extent, 45 stacks or whatever, because, raid leading and playing Shadow Priest at the same time is probably the hardest thing I've ever done. But
I thought Fire Mage and raid leading was the hardest thing you've ever done.
No, it's not hard. It's just not fun. I don't like the Combust playstyle. As
do.
far as difficult, Shadow Priest plus raid leading at the same time. Shadow Priest on its own is difficult. Raid leading on its own can be difficult. When you add the two together, it's definitely difficult. But, it's as far as any other class, I like all the other classes. Thematically, I like some. Mechanically, I like others. I've always loved Enhancement, just mechanically. Super fun, fast, high APM playstyle. You're mashing all your buttons and hitting the bosses, whatever. I fucking love ferals. They've always been dog shit, but I love them.
That's
I don't know.
Man, that is community perception, and we're probably not going to get into it as a topic today, but I'm sure we'll get into it eventually. But
yeah,
ferals really got the shaft with community perception.
Oh yeah, they definitely do.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to take a good player playing Feral to be like, hey, look, I'm doing damage. You're all wrong. I think Drew could be the one.
Is he the chosen one?
Whenever I was raiding earlier, whenever I was raiding earlier on my hunter, there was a Feral Druid that I raided with that was top 3 pretty consistently. They're out there.
Yeah, that exists.
Well, since we kind of went into it a little bit with alts, let's crack into this one with alts.
Whoa, hold on. You didn't answer. What class won't you play?
I did answer, but I answered before I asked the question. A caster. I won't play a caster. You won't see me on a mage, warlock, boomkin, nothing.
Right. My brain didn't order it that way, so when you said that before the question, I was like, but you didn't answer, even though you literally did. Okay. I'm just dumb. Keep going.
Established. All right.
Every week, it's got to be established again.
So, alts in Shadowlands, just as a topic, how do you guys feel alts are going to work out in Shadowlands? Do you think that, we can all remember back, we all started at the launch of BFA. Some of us played 2 characters. Whew. But now in Shadowlands,
2 of the same character.
Yeah. With all the research, because we've spent the past week digging up every little scrap of information on Shadowlands that is currently available. Rise, we'll start with you. How do you feel about alts going into Shadowlands? And we'll just cover the first raid tier. We aren't going to say the entirety of Shadowlands is what alts are going to be like. Just what we have available to us.
So I want to say right up front to people that are like, oh, I want to play multiple characters in Shadowlands. The way that I'm going to construe my wording is that I think it is possible, but it is very unlikely, and it's going to make your game experience very unfriendly with all the research I have done. Having to already level from 50 to 60 is going to take, probably a day or so, depending on how hard you're pushing, or if you're stopping for side quests or other things. But most of the time when you push through, then all of a sudden you're going to have all these game choices. You're going to have to make a couple hundred decisions about your conduits, which, club you're going to join is the way that I like to think of it. You're going to be wanting to do all your dungeons. You're going to be wanting to pick up all your profession stuff. You're going to be drawn around to do all these side quests, including world quest, weeklies, dailies, everything. So when you're thinking about that kind of grind and staying consistent, at least from a higher level perspective, being able to do that effectively on multiple characters is going to be nigh impossible, in my opinion, with the current game systems. I think to some degree, it's doable, but one of your two characters will slack behind significantly, just because there's so much to do, there's so much information to process, that most of the time, you won't even get the information right on your first character, which I also think is a real big shame, and that's something that we'll, probably talk a little bit about later. But there's way too many choices. There's going to be a lot of busy work. And yeah, if you're planning on, just making a character for raid, Sired and Aetherius and that raid tier doesn't come out for, a month and a half, or, at least a couple weeks. So you have some time, but I really think people aren't realizing how hamstringed you're going to be by all the game systems that are being put in place to delve into and make sure that you're doing on a weekly basis to keep your character updated. So again, just short and sweet, I think it's possible, but it's going to be very, very unlikely for a lot of people to hold alts to a high standard and being able to do them effectively.
I think I can add on to that a little bit. There's two things that you basically just brushed past pretty quickly in that I think warrant a little bit deeper of a conversation. The first one being the game systems. Now, obviously, you're going to want your legendary. And obviously, you're going to have to go and get your covenant and get all of your conduits, and you want to start working down that stuff as fast as possible. But there are certain things like rep grinds, for example, I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit more in depth later, that you don't necessarily need to do. Like in BFA and even Legion, you wanted to get to Exalted to get that, normal raid quality gear that you couldn't farm elsewhere. You couldn't even get something equivalent to it elsewhere before raid, so you wanted to get Exalted. The way it's going to work in Shadowlands, from every source I've read, watched, seen, everything, is that anything that's regarded to player power is locked at Honored. So Honored is going to be much more accessible. The other thing was, as far as professions go, if you're a raider and you really want to maintain two characters, I think it's possible, but you are going to have to give up some sacrifices. You only have to do the Torghast twice a week for your Ash shit for your legendaries, so that's not too bad. But world quests are a lot different. Instead of being 1 minute and you're done, it's 15 minutes per quest, which can take a little bit more time. So that's going to throw that off too. But the things that you can give up on are professions and stuff. If you want to just buy your base legendary item, because you need the base to make the legendary, if you want to just buy that off the auction house, you totally can. You don't have to go and farm up all that stuff and then make it and all that stuff. So you can save time there. It's just, if you're one of those people who has a full-time job, and then you get home, have dinner with your family or whatever, and then you've only got 4 or 5 hours to play every night, I highly doubt you're going to have time to level and then maintain two characters, because it's not like once you level cap, you're done. Once you level cap, then you got to get into heroic dungeons, start getting geared up, get into mythic dungeons, get into mythic plus dungeons, start spamming as many as you can to get as geared as you can. If you get really good luck, yeah, you can do, 15 mythic pluses and get one item for every slot, and you're good for raid. But the chances of that happening are incredibly small.
Yeah,
it's going to take a lot more time commitment. And then duplicate that, because you're going to have to do it twice, because you want another character. I think it's often overlooked, the amount of work that goes into one character. And honestly, I feel like most people, outside of probably the top tier of raiders, which, let's be honest, we're not right now in that position, but I always think of these things. But people outside of like Limit or BDG or whatever don't think about the fact that all of that time commitment does add up, and people think once they hit cap, they go do a couple Mythic Pluses a week, that's good enough. And at least in my mind, it's not. So if you want to add another character on top of that, good fucking luck. But there are things that you can cut out that you don't have to do if you want to save time. I don't think it's going to be feasible.
I like how the three of us are pretty much on the same wavelength. I want to hear Ganju's version, because unless I'm mistaken, he mentioned something about playing another character at the start of Shadowlands?
Yeah, I am apparently a masochist at this point now. I think, I mean, I definitely do agree with both Jay and Rise's comments on how difficult it's going to be. But as Jay also mentioned, there is things that you can cut out, and Professions is definitely one of them. I already don't work on fucking Professions. That is horrible. I hate Professions, honestly.
They're becoming more relevant.
I know they
Yeah,
are becoming more relevant, but I still cannot stand them. I think it's a terrible system on how they are going about it. You know, I don't like it. But doing some of the dailies, yeah, that's going to be difficult to try to maintain both. Having to do all of your dailies, trying to clear the board for both characters. That's where I'm kind of drawing the line, where I'm not going to clear the board with both characters. The mage is my main. The warlock is an alt. It will be, gear ready and everything like that as far as, progression goes. Say we need a warlock for whatever reason because Soju shit the bed and the Otter decided to post out one night or, something like that, and we don't have a warlock, but, Nithin's there and he's playing Arcane, and we get, that little 5% buff from him, so I can just easily swap over to my warlock. Yeah, I'm not going to keep up with everybody, but I'm still going to do better than, most other people would. Because my gear will still be there.
Fair point.
All right, you can be the masochist. I'm Thank you for your sacrifice. I'm
a
with
potential chance I'll be joining you too, but we'll just have to really wait and see.
right now. It just looks like it's pretty defeating to try to make two characters that are anywhere near ready. Go ahead, Jay.
I was going to mention, despite everything that I just said, I'm also going to have a second character ready. It won't be raid ready. Like, I'm not going to go quite insane, but I want to have it to the point where it's leveled up within the first week or two. That way, if it turns out that Brew is just not going to be good enough, I will have a backup. So that I can just switch over, ram Mythic Pluses down its throat until it gets geared enough to tank and take it. And that'll likely be a Blood Death Knight or Vengeance Demon Hunter. I'm
one and done. It's a rare for me.
I was gonna say this is reverse land because
right.
Normally we're all doing one character and you're doing four.
Right. Typically, I do at least two simultaneously, and sometimes three or four. But yeah, I just looking at it, and my experience with BFA really taught me that the Shadowlands systems, in terms of the time sinks that you're going to have to go through, are really similar.
Yeah. I think, speaking of the things that you can cut out, Professions is one of those things. And as I said, I don't want anybody to like cut off the conversation there and just be like, cool, we don't have to do Professions. Professions are going to be fucking awesome. Weapon oils are back. Sharpening stones are back. Weight stones are back. All of that stuff is back. So, I mean, blacksmiths, leatherworkers, because you get armor patches now, they're consumable buffs that last for 2 hours. So, if you're a member of the Psy Raid, make sure you are coming to Raid prepared with health pots, DPS pots, food, weight stones, or sharpening stones or oils, and
leather patches.
Patches. Bring all of that stuff. You're going to need it. And if you're not, you might get sat. We have people to sit. So.
But I'm already sitting. What do you mean?
Well, I guess one of the things that I would like to segue into is one of the things that is kind of disheartening in like the current state of BFA is when you log onto a new character, you're kind of time gated by a week to week system about how you can get some of your gear. Like if you want the top end, the highest quality gear, you have to do a mythic, 15, and then you randomly get assigned one piece of gear. If you want to do, the mythic raid and get raid gear, you can only do that once a week. If you're doing high level PvP, you can only get your conquest box once a week. But one thing that is pretty key to notice about that system is that there's a lot more like valuable loot that you can get. So like when you're thinking of like what do I need for the raid, to be prepared, like the game systems are going to be a lot easier to have access to. Everyone's going to be able to have all these professions, so you're going to be able to do all of these professions to be able to inkling out that extra little percent of gear. Plus, like as far as the reward systems that you're getting for the week, you're having a lot more options. So,
You guys
as
want
far as the reward system,
talk about that?
yeah, if you guys want to transition to that, unless you guys have something more to say about professions, but
did I mention that they were, kind of shitty?
Yeah. Yes, you did. Thank you.
Got that impression.
Okay.
So let's move on to then the new reward types things that you can do. I, for one, fucking love this. If you don't like Mythic Plus, you don't have to do Mythic Plus. You can just do, fucking dungeon or not dungeon. Sorry, I'm retarded.
If you don't like dungeons, you can just do dungeons.
Yeah, if you don't like Mythic Plus, you can just do Mythic Plus. No, but if you don't like Mythic Plus, you can just do PvP, and like you can, how you can get your like Conquest cache right now, or you can get your Mythic Plus cache right now. Like you can get both of them. In Shadowlands, you're gonna have like 9 different boxes to choose from, depended by what kind of content you did last week. And the more of the content that you do, the more that you get to choose from, and you get to see what the results are. So if you get 1,000 conquest or whatever, maybe it's like we've randomly determined that this will give you a trinket. And you did a Mythic 15 last week, and it's like we've randomly determined you get a weapon. You get to determine like, well, I already have my best in slot trinkets. I guess I'll take the weapon. Like, but there's like 9 different options depending on the content you did last week. I think that is probably one of my favorite changes that they've made in regards to how you get weekly shit. I think that's fantastic.
Oh, hands down.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that, especially with someone. Can't believe I'm going to say this. Someone like myself, that's every other week pushing keys and doing 10 or more Mythic Plus dungeons. That I still only get one random piece of gear that isn't even an upgrade.
The fact that you can put in extra work on paper and have a chance to get like 9 different options that you can just look through and choose. And plus, if you're doing the higher content, the stuff is better. So if you're doing, a Mythic plus 5, if that's the cap, and you do that multiple times, you're going to find gear that is rated to that content. But if you're doing 15s or 10s or whatever the new cap is at any given time, you're going to be getting gear that's associated with that content. So not only does it reward players that are doing harder content, but it also kind of gives a reason to like push keys, to like do a bunch of dungeons, to do a lot more PvP. Yeah, you don't have to do it. It's not a requirement. But the fact that you can go and choose now just makes that game system so much more friendly. And it's also going to make it much better for raiders because now you get to choose. It's not the box gave me crap week 9, and then week 10 I got a 1% upgrade. It's every week I can choose. Do I want the 1% upgrade? Do I want the sword, trinket, ring? I can choose now. I think that's a huge step in the right direction.
One of the best parts about that I didn't mention, and you were just about there, is if you don't like any of your 9 options, you can just take currency.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's
if you look at all your options and they all suck, just take the gold and run.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. It's making the game much more alt-friendly, much more main character-friendly. It's going to make gearing so much easier and so much cleaner. It's probably one of the best changes, in my eyes, that's coming to Shadowlands.
It's also kind of catering to the quote-unquote casuals that literally just raid log, or even towards the end of expansions, kind of like what most of us are doing right now. You get 115 done, you raid log, literally that's it. That if your guild is full clearing, or even if you're not part of a guild and you're full clearing, you still have those options. You still have 3 options that you can choose from rather than just getting dicked by one piece.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Do we know all the 9 sources? It's rating, Mythic Plus, and PvP, right?
Yeah, so
And there's 3 different levels of that.
I actually did a lot of research on the Great Vault. So it's if you kill 3 raid bosses, you get 1 box. Then 7 raid bosses, you unlock the second, and then 10 raid bosses in a week, you get the third. For Mythic Dungeons, it's 1 key, 4 keys, and 10 keys. And then for Conquest, it's 125, 350, and then 875 Conquest. So if you're grinding really hard on one character, getting 875 Conquest in a week, that's not too difficult. It might take you a day and a half of doing, some bounties that are related to PvP. If you're running keys on a good push week, you're easily going to do 10 keys in a week. And then if you're a part of a raid team, whether you're doing normal, heroic, or mythic, as long as you kill 10 bosses, the difficulty's irrelevant, you get the 3 choices there. So you go into next week after putting in a full week of work on your character, and you get to look at 3 pieces of raid gear that you can potentially roll, 3 pieces of PvP gear you can potentially roll, and 3 pieces of dungeon gear you can potentially roll. It's just fantastic. It definitely is so good for catering for every type of player, even casuals, as Nick said.
Yeah, because what you guys are pointing out is the lunatic version where you do 10 keys, 10 bosses, and 850 conquests. Yeah, that will get you all 9 selections. You won't get all 9 pieces. You get to pick one of the 9.
Yeah.
So the people that aren't lunatics, that only do a key, do 4 bosses in raid, you still got a selection of 3. And that's just because you went and did what you do every week anyway. At the end of the week, you get a selection of 3 different items.
Yeah, and if you're one of those people that likes to raid, and you'll do 1 key a week because it's required by your raiding guild, and aside from that, you like to PvP a little bit with a couple of your friends every week, well, all you got to get is, Rise had said, 150 conquests for the first one and 500 for the second one. That's pretty attainable.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, just by raiding with your guild, doing 1 key and a couple of PvPs, you'll have 4 or 5 options every week very, very easily. I think it's probably, like I said, it's one of my favorite changes that they've made because it opens up options, and I am one of those terrible people with luck where, my mom always says, if I didn't have bad luck, I wouldn't have any. I went for a string there on my mage when I was briefly playing mage before I main switched to Shadow Priest, after I main switched from another class and another class. I went for a string there for 12 weeks where I got nothing.
Yeah,
absolutely nothing.
Literally in the middle of that drought right now. I haven't gotten a single good piece of gear since, I got the pants back when you were playing your mage.
Yeah.
That's rough.
It's one of those things that is just, if I could at least have options and I can see that all 9 options are garbage and I go, well, okay, at least I had options, I'll take the gold. I would so much rather do that. There's nothing I hate worse than logging on a Tuesday, because I'll often come home for lunch on a Tuesday, open up my chest and be like, ooh, what am I going to get?
Dog shit.
It's a shard. It's a shard. I don't even know what the item is. I just know that it's going to be disenchanted and, disenchantment's done. It's a shard. That is one of my biggest pet peeves about the current system. But speaking of differences from the current system, one of the things that I like as well in regards to rating and how they changed loot, small sidestep, I love Master Loot. I think it was a great thing. I don't like that they took that away for BFA. That's just me. I think personal loot is terrible. There are certain classes that do better with loot, and for progression, you want to feed gear to that class, and unfortunately, if somebody of an undesirable gear class gets an item, they can't trade it because they don't have an equipped higher item level. It's stupid. I think if you're in the same guild, maybe you should be able to toggle whether or not you want to be able to trade something sooner. I think that would be a great change, because I'm willing to give up gear to somebody who's better if it means the guild's going to progress anymore. But one of the things I really like that they're also doing, as well as the loot from the end of the week stuff, is when you kill bosses, you get tokens. And then you can take those tokens.
I believe it's only for weapons. Correct me if I'm wrong. Or did they announce more on that?
I didn't see if there was any armor yet, but the thing that I'm most excited for that I saw was the tokens that you can get for weapons, shields, offhand, stuff like that. I believe armor is something that you just loot. but I think raid loot is all tokens. It might just be for the weapons. But
I
that's one thing that I was like, loot's my last priority on research.
Yeah, for
I
the
don't
research
care
that
about
I looked at, it looked like all of the weapons and offhand stuff. So any shields, staves, bows, all that stuff was related to a token, which, to be fair, is also a very,
To be
very good
fair.
change. Yeah, to be fair.
To be fair.
I haven't seen if they have them for armor, but I wouldn't be surprised if they go that route because I think that that's a healthy route. But yeah, I think that that's also one of the best changes. Being able to have a hunter in your guild get a weapon token drop. Like at that point, it's the hunter only can get bows and crossbows. Maybe a polearm if they're awkwardly playing survival hunter. No judgment to them. Not throwing shade yet. But if you are playing that class and you get a weapon drop, if you already have that bow, or if there's no other hunters in your raid, that loot is worthless. So the fact that I can be on a shaman now and I can get a one-handed fist weapon token drop, and then I can say, hey, does anyone actually need a weapon? And a hunter can say, yeah, I need a crossbow. I can give him my token, that's a weapon token. He can go to a vendor and it produces a crossbow. Or he could give it to a warlock and it could produce a staff. Or he could give it to a mage and it could produce a wand. Obviously, there are tiers of who I can actually trade with, but I think that is also a very, very healthy change because it makes some classes have almost like a toxic set of loot, where when you're looking for a hunter, they have to kill this boss because it's the only boss in the entire raid that drops a bow, and the bow has good stats. And then if you don't get that for 10 weeks, you're screwed. But now,
in present day, it's Skitra in Nyalotha.
Exactly.
Every hunter wanted to be in for Skitra, and it's like, crap, we got to cycle in the hunters. All right, hunters, and we're sitting them for prog because they don't do damage, and then they all get their bows, and it's like, okay, now they're in for prog, but you couldn't use them before they got the bow. Now that problem's gone. You just take that token and put it, on somebody else who's going to better use that item, or
And get your Skitra bow.
Yeah. Or like Rise said, if he already got a weapon and he gets another token, he can just be like, here's a weapon, hunter, go get your Skitra bow.
Exactly.
Or if you're working on, let's say, if you are working on Skitra, lol, and your Abyss weapon drops off Carapace, and it's a one-hander, you're screwed. If you cannot get that one-hander, then you are literally just a floor licker.
Yeah, you're gimped pretty much forever. And now you could probably kill the first or second boss of a raid tier, trade that weapon token to 5 different classes, and boom, everyone now has their weapons near the start of progression, and that's a huge change, getting that extra weapon damage.
Definitely.
I'm getting the sense that was a little bit of a personal experience for you, Ganja?
Maybe.
I mean, my Abyss weapon does drop off of Carapace, and no, I did not get it.
I coined and I didn't get it either.
I coined and got nothing either.
Yeah.
I was going to trade it to you if I got it, but I coined and then looted, and neither of them gave me anything.
Speaking of...
Try it.
Did you see Air's clip from our kill on Carapace?
Oh, yeah.
As a side note...
Press button, get loot.
Seeing his face, how happy he looked, that's the reason that people rated that
right.
level. Because it's it's such a fucking dopamine rush when that boss dies.
What? Where is this? What channel's it in?
It's in streams.
Mm-hmm.
Is it in streams? I have that channel muted.
It's the only channel you have muted then?
Yeah, go check in there for it at some point.
Oh, I'm doing it right now.
Live on the air.
I guess just to throw it out as a quick side note, and we'll be talking about a lot of topics tonight, but one of the things that I think, I'm not sure if all of us share this similar opinion, but the opinion that I share a lot heavily in terms of the research that I've done as far as most of these changes, anything that has a player agency where you can choose your own things, those are the good game systems. And I feel like we'll talk about a lot of game systems later that you don't have that agency in, and those are the ones that people are kind of sketched out about. How do you guys feel about that? Just as a general comment.
Mean, that's a strong lead into Covenants, because that's what Blizzard is selling Covenants as, is players get to make their decisions here, and they have consequences. Woof.
I have thoughts that I'm sure all of you will agree with. Covenants, take the power off of it.
Yeah. I'd be fine with that.
I think it's too late, though.
I mean, they said they have a ripcord, whatever that means. So if it doesn't work, then they can just cancel it. But let's be honest. They want us to choose Covenants based on what we like thematically and whatever. But as a brewmaster, I'm not going to be taking Venthyr. So if I like vampires, which I do. I really like vampires. Like fucking Bram Stoker's my spirit animal. But nope, can't do it. It's so fucking bad for brewmasters that it's not an option. The other three, yeah, fine options. One of which is slightly lesser than the other two, but otherwise it's just not an option that you can take.
I mean, at least you have options, whereas, with Mage, Skeleton from Meldraxxus, it is vastly far behind compared to Venthir's Mirror of Torments. Or even with Warlock, picking Maldraxxus. If I wanted to pick Kyrian for whatever reason, I'm losing out on Decimating Bolt that I already told you guys before we even started this. Yeah, they nerfed it, but it's still a massive, stacking buff to my one drained soul that, that could be make or break for killing a boss.
Yeah. And, well, some of the weird things for some of the classes is sometimes people look at an ability and they're like, oh, well, that doesn't seem that impactful. But you have to consider that it's such a multidimensional thing. When you're picking that choice, you're not just getting one ability. Is that something we want to jump into now, or do we want to hit on other topics first?
I think we should not skip the next topic. We can come back to covenants and conduits.
Sure, fair enough.
Because this, we can hit the next topic and then come back to covenants, because there's something very important in the next topic that I feel will lead us perfectly right back into covenants.
Okay.
In a very, I've been gearing up for this conversation all week.
Is it that thing that Cappy and I really like?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Gotcha.
For this stream and for the VOD, we had some drama in the guild this week. Don't worry, it wasn't anything anybody was going to G-quit over, but basically there was an argument between some people who can choose to identify themselves or not. The argument was based on Mythic Plus and how covenants will come into play. So the next topic that we were going to talk about anyways was Mythic Plus, so I'll kind of breach these two at the same time.
Hold on.
Mythic Plus, I think...
Before we get into Mythic Plus, how about we just talk about the dungeons themselves? Before, we go into them, we aren't hitting Mythic Plus day one. We're going to experience the dungeons, and have you guys checked them out? And what do you think of the dungeons overall from not a Mythic Plus standpoint?
So I'll go ahead and start, because I looked at a lot of the dungeons, including how they, acted, even routing for them, for as far as what people would think is Mythic Plus later. But the dungeons actually look really good. The most important thing is that they fit a really good thematic theme for each zone. You can definitely tell when you're in zone to zone, and it also lines up pretty well, I would say, with the storyline. I'm not going to try to spoil many of the storylines specifically, but they all really flow well. They lead into each other. They actually feel like they have a purpose. Some of the boss fights definitely feel a little overtuned, and maybe that's just because of how beta footage looks, or people don't have their max out characters yet. But some of those fights and some of those dungeons look like they are going to be like miniature raid bosses, to where I even think you might need certain classes to be able to kill those bosses anyway. Even on just like a lower mythic standard, going into Mythic Plus, that might be really difficult for some groups. But I think it's really important that they flow really well. The art style in there is really, really cool. And it's different mechanics. It's not the same shit that you've seen. A boss does this, a boss cleaves, and then a boss does this interruptible cast or whatever. There's a lot going on. They feel like almost like mini theatrical raid bosses, which is really, really a good thing, I think, that the game needs. Because it also gives players that are more casual, when they go in there, it makes them feel like they're doing this great grand adventure, that they're killing this huge, important, lore-related boss, when in reality they're just doing a normal dungeon for their first clear on week 2 because they're a total casual. But I think that the dungeons right now look really, really good overall. Little concerned with some of the loot that you get from dungeons, but I guess that's not as important right now.
As far as the dungeons go, I agree with you what you said about them, thematically and all that stuff. The ones that I've specifically kind of put like a little asterisk next to because I think they're cool. The one that I'm most excited to check out is the Halls of Atonement. Mm-hmm. I really like the whole thematic sense of it, like, coming up on the church, and then, you got that Lord Chamberlain, I think his name is, at the end. Just, the whole theme is super edgelord, dark, and kind of cruel, and I just love it. On the flip side of that, Spires of Ascension looks dope.
I mean, I don't know.
So cool.
Theater of Pain looks really freaking cool, as well as
Right?
the kind of everything on how you're going about it being placed in a coliseum, basically, where all of the Maldraxxus Covenant people are watching you go through and fighting all these, giant patchwork hulks and crawling through the catacomb underneath the coliseum, trying to make your way out and beat the quote-unquote, tournament or whatever. I think that right there is probably the pinnacle of all the dungeons out of the ones that they have put in.
Just since you guys were naming specific dungeons, I think The Other Side.
I was going to mention that one.
The Other
That was my
Side,
number 2.
for those casual players that haven't experienced like a true raid boss, they're going to get into that dungeon, and again, without spoiling it, the last boss is going to feel like a real raid encounter for them. It's going to be a massive ordeal. And with the mechanics, especially going into like a mythic difficulty, that dungeon looks really fucking hard. But it's going to be so rewarding when you end up clearing it. That's probably going to be my favorite dungeon.
I mean, Hakar is the first boss. Of course it's going to be hard.
I like it.
Sorry,
I like
spoilers, but
the other way, or the other side, because, and this is something that really surprised me. It's simple layout, and not only like, well, you're obviously going to go here to there to there to there to there, done. Like, there's no deviation really, and you can see it from the very beginning, from the entrance. You're like, well, I know what I'm doing here. I guess I better start cracking. And I actually think that works for it, just in my opinion, on how it goes, which is weird because normally I like the more complex dungeons, but just the simple design really drew me to that one. But since we've given a brief thought, an overview of dungeons in general, I think now we can crack on into Mythic Plus. Thoughts, how the changes are going to affect Mythic Plus, everything about Mythic Plus.
I'll set the stage for you here.
Okay.
So, the conversation in our guild's Mythic Plus dungeon chat. Firstly, let me say I love Mythic Plus. I think it's fucking awesome, and I know Meeps is sitting there going, "No, it's not. I'm gonna do one a week and I'm out." But I love it. I think it's awesome. It kind of gives me vibes a little bit of challenge modes. I know it's not the same thing. I love the competitive aspect of it. I love the fact that, it has a cap, so if you just want to farm gear, you get to the cap and you're done. But I love the fact that you can push even higher. Things like Raider.io have made it basically a competitive leaderboard, essentially of, who's got the biggest E-dick. And I love that. I'm a very competitive person, so I think that's fantastic. Okay, that being said... Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to kind of tackle onto that. I'm not much of a competitive person, hence why I don't PvP or play Apex or do any of that, but with Mythic Plus, it gives more life into dungeons, and it increases the amount of content that you can do very easily by continually pushing high keys and challenging yourself and pushing yourself to overcome those challenges very, in a fun way, because... yeah, you can pug, but you get a group of friends together and you do it, it's amazing.
It really gives the game replayability factor, which is something that a lot of top-end games, or especially MMOs, seem to suffer from, because you can only do certain content, every X amount of time. But with the Mythic Plus, every week you're getting a new key, a new difficulty, a new set of things that you have to go by, and it really changes it. So it does give that replayability factor, which is really, really important for the game.
Yeah, and so really quickly, let's take an aside and answer the second part of this question before we come back to it.
Sure. All right.
This one that I'm highlighting.
Yeah.
Let's go to that one first. Because the other one's going to be like 30-minute rant fest, and not just from me.
Well, then I'll pose the question, because I really don't have any idea for this, because you guys do much more Mythic Plus than I do. I have a very different feel about the whole system than pretty much most of the people that play WoW, it seems like. So I do Mythic Plus. Sometimes I hate it, sometimes it's alright. but I'm not really interested in it. But do you guys have any ideas for cool affixes?
Ooh.
Looks like Jay doesn't. Gondru, you want to take this?
Oh, fuck.
Sure. So they did add a few new affixes this upcoming tier or this upcoming expansion with inspiring, spiteful, and storming. Me being a range player now, coming from melee and seeing storming as an affix where it's just a random tornado coming out and throwing melee up into the air is fucking hilarious to me.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun to dodge.
It's gonna be fantastic.
Why did I switch to tank in this expansion?
But as
The
far
worst
as like
ground effects.
as far as like a cool idea for a different affix or something to that idea is I like obelisks how they are right now, but with a little bit of a twist. Instead of them being in a set location, have it be like a thing from beyond that spawns every so often as far as like trash progression goes. You know, you get to 20% trash progression. Oh crap, there's this random obelisk that, you know, boss that spawned out of nowhere, and he pulls you into his realm, and then you start fighting him and kiting him to the next place that you want to take that portal to. Or, you know, something along those lines. That would be my ideal for like a cool affix.
I'll do you one better as a suggestion. When you start the key, 4 of the people in the key randomly are chosen to get a item that when you drop it on the ground, you have to like kill like a mini boss, which will then open up a Shadow Realm skip for you. Very similar to that, but you got to kill the boss first. I think that would be very cool. That way you can put it anywhere you want.
Yeah, that would definitely
that would give you so many different routes for like Mythic Plus and stuff. Watching MDI and seeing like, you know, like for example, if it's freehold, like they get to a certain percentage or whatever. Okay, we can have our obelisk now. Like, yeah, but let's not use it right here. Let's go to this place so we can skip just straight to here or whatever. Like, I think that would be.
At the same time, that subverts the whole concept of Ganju's idea, because
Kind of.
the way Ganju's idea would work is highly skilled and experienced groups will know which mobs to pull in which dungeons at what time and kill them at what time to have that same effect, essentially. So it's kind of a higher skill cap idea of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, having like
On
a
the note-
randomness aspect would make it just that much more difficult, and it'd be that much more entertaining to do as well.
On the note of a higher skill capped affix, I came up with an affix that I think would be. Everybody's gonna hate this, but I call it overflowing, and basically what it is every monster that you kill, every time, like let's say I pull 5 monsters, right, and we kill one, the percentage of its hit points immediately goes to every monster within 40 yards or whatever as a shield. Then you got to break that shield. So if you got a big AoE pack of 5 monsters and you kill one before everything else, they all get a percentage of its maximum hit points as a shield. Plus, that also applies as a dot to everybody, or as a shield to all of your party members. So that'll have to get healed off, but you can still take damage while you have that shield. So, for example, if you're a DPS, stabby, 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 stabby. Oh, I got a 20k shield on top of me now. Your healer's trying to heal it. He's got to heal off that 20k shield before he can heal your actual hit points. So it's kind of like a two-way thing. I think it's very fucking difficult, but I like difficulty. So
I mean, that sounds really close to bolstering.
Yeah.
A little bit, yeah.
It is
with a
kind of,
twist.
but it's like to both the monsters and to you.
Yeah.
That way you can get creative about how many things you want to pull at once. You can either pull really, really small and it won't be an issue, or if you want to pull big and pull 10 monsters at once, you better kill them all at literally the exact same millisecond. Otherwise, everybody in your party is going to have this massive shield the healer's got to heal through, and all the monsters you're fighting are going to have this massive shield that your DPS got to DPS through.
Speaking of big pulls,
And it applies to bosses.
I think
there's an AoE cap. You can't pull big anymore.
right. I was about to say that's something we'll probably talk about is the capped AoE.
I believe you can. I believe you still can. It's going to be like, okay, obviously there's going to be a cap. If your character, say your ignite can only spread to 5 targets and you pulled 10, yeah, you can't pull 10 mobs and expect to nuke them all down at the same time. But I think you can still pull big. And you're just going to end up leaving a trail of bodies. It's not going to be they're all dead at one spot. I think it's still going to be more efficient to pull more and literally pick one monster out of all of that needs to die ASAP. Everybody targets that, and the rest of it just gets cleaved down at random percentages or whatever. Then you go to the next priority target, nuke that down. By the time you've gotten 3 or 4 priority targets nuked down, the rest is all 20%. You finish it. I don't think it's as big a deal as most of the community seems to think it is. And I could be completely wrong. And to answer Gilvy's question, because I'm a masochist.
Fair enough. I think it'd be really hard for me to make a normal affix to go with, but I think I would have an idea for a very interesting seasonal affix. Something that we might touch on later, the Maw. I think that the Maw has a very interesting mechanic where as the bad man, the jailer, watches you, he slowly ramps up a meter against you. How interesting would it be to have a meter like that in Mythic Plus? To where, you've been in the dungeon, and, you're under a certain time limit, but if you're taking a certain amount of time, it's like the jailer spawns something against you, or, you deal with, a mechanic where you have to, hide from him, or, you have to kill, a Valkyr mini-boss or something. But in the way that it's based on a time limit of you being in there, not based on, a percentile thing. So a top Mythic Plus group will have to realize, oh, we're taking this long in the dungeon. If we're not killing these trash packs quick enough, by the time we're halfway fighting this boss, if we're not nuking the boss fast enough, it'll spawn this Valkyrie that we have to kill. And that's because the jailer's meter went up to a certain extent. So instead of basing it off of how much trash percent have you killed, like in the past with Reaping, it would be instead, it's time limit. So at some point, everyone knows that something's going to spawn, so you have to prepare for that time limit, whether that's you learn to pull different trash packs before a boss, that way you're not overlapping a boss with Reaping, or pulling a specific way where you have enough room to deal with the Valkyr ad, something like that. I think that would be a really interesting mechanic.
Isn't that really close to what Reaping is, though? Once you get to a certain percentage?
Well, yeah, so Reaping was when you got to a certain percentage, all of the old ads would come back alive. What I'm suggesting is make it off of a time limit thing. So it's not based off of how much percent. It's, say, 7 minutes, 30 seconds into the dungeon, it spawns one of 3 things. It could be maybe a Valkyr, or maybe you guys get an extra action button where you have to be out of combat and you have to hide from the jailer's wrath, or something like that where it's not necessarily random, but it's also not based off of something that you can always control to a perfect degree. Whereas if you're fighting a boss and you look at a boss and say, can we kill this boss in 3 minutes, or do we have to do something else and wait for this mechanic to come up? Because then it would be, maybe they have to change the lust timings to kill a boss before an awakened ad, or not awakened, but this new Valkyr ad shows up. Or, are we going to be able to get through this trash area and have enough space to deal with this ad that it's spawned? Something that's time related, I think, would be a lot cooler than having something that's just percentile related. Because percentile related, any person can control and know exactly when they're going to trigger a thing. But if it's time related, depending on what kind of team you have, or what kind of damage you have, or depending on this affixes of the week, it might be much harder to control that. I think that might make for a more competitive, more difficult style of play for seasonal affix like that.
I think that it was brought up in the chat, but I think in a non-linear dungeon, that sounds fantastic. Mm-hmm. But if you're in a linear dungeon, think King's Rest, and you get to second boss, the door isn't open. You have to just stand there for 3 minutes and wait before you can fight the golem.
Yeah, but I mean that would then beg the question: do you lust early so you can push the golem a minute faster, and then you just wait for 30 seconds before you spawn the ad, or is your good group enough? This boss is cake. Think of the first boss, or maybe the second boss of Freehold. A boss that's easier in retrospect to the King's Rest bosses. If the boss is really easy, can we go to the 4th boss of the dungeon and pull the last boss of Freehold with the ad that's going to spawn in 45 seconds, and then we save lust and we're basically just in execute phase anyway? I think that would be really interesting to see what kind of teams would do and how they would tackle keys with something that's time related, where they might not have the ability to practice it over and over.
I think, kind of adding on to that, instead of it being like an ad that spawns or a mini boss or something like that, I don't know how many of us were part of the pre-patch event of Cataclysm, but in certain areas Deathwing would come over and just blast fire upon that entire area, and if you were in that area, you were dead. But you never fought it. You never, well, in the end of the expansion you did, but during that pre-patch, he flew around the entire world and he was, killing players and things like that. So I think rather than having an ad or a mini boss or something like that, have it be a quote-unquote layer effect. Every certain amount of trash or time or whatever you want to do with it, have the jailer's fist come down and smash just, this entire little part of the arena. And if you're in that part of the arena, you're fucked.
Yeah, that'd be really cool.
Or, something along those lines, rather than having to deal with an ad that, is literally everything else that you have to deal with an ad.
Yeah, something like that could be really cool. I just think it would be cool to have it be something that's almost random as far as like what it could produce, but more importantly, have it being scaled off of time. So if you're doing it with a new Mythic Plus group or a group that maybe doesn't do seasoned runs all the time, like an MDI team, it's something that is really unique, and you have to make much more in-game decisions or like on-the-moment decisions about, are we pulling this pack? Do we have to go someplace else? Are we pulling this boss? Are we lusting early to, avoid having this at a bad time? I feel like that would make it more competitive. Or at least that's what I think would be a cool FX.
Yeah.
Oh, I just got a good idea too. I got this mostly from a movie, but I just saw what Mojo said in chat. He said, based on what Rise said, makes me think of an affix in Torghast spawned at the entrance of the Mythic Plus and started walking towards the closest player, and after a certain time or percent, it was slow enough to control. Okay, remember the movie It Follows? Let's just have an ad that spawns, and it chases you, and if it touches you, you die. And it can happen at any time. But you'll see it, and it'll always walk. So you can always outrun it.
That sounds like corruption, so I'm gonna have to give that note to that one, dog.
And you can
but
CC
you
it?
can't get rid of it in any way. You can't kill it, you can't CC it, you can't stun it, nothing. You have to you can walk around it in circles because you can run faster than it can walk, but you just have to keep moving. I think that'd be fantastic.
What about
I think if you CC'd it, it would have to work, because there would be some class that would be impossible. Like, how would you play a caster under that constraints?
Easy. You walk 5 feet, cast for a second or two, and then walk 5 more feet. It goes at walking speed. You go at running speed. So you're twice as fast as it. You just have to stutter step. It's going to mean your damage is lower, yes, but it's an affix. It's not meant to be a breeze.
Yeah. No, I guess that's fair.
And also, I'm a masochist. We went over this.
Fair.
If you had one, Meeps, what do you think you would have?
Oh, I've been tuning out this whole conversation. Sorry.
You're not a Mythic Plus boy.
His affix is, as soon as you kill something, it gives you a portal straight to the end where you can click on a chest, get loot, and get the fuck out of there.
Right.
I like that affix.
Yeah, I like that too. Can we implement that?
It's called the Meeps. Yeah.
So where was the conversation segueing into before we went off on this tangent?
Okay. I love the stream overlay now. That's great. Okay, so since we finally touched the actual dungeons and the ideas for the cool affix, let's go back to the meat and potatoes of this topic. Mythic Plus, how we think it's going to be in Shadowlands. Now, back to the conversation, the argument that was in our Mythic Plus chat, in our guild's Discord, was basically about covenants and the new Covenant Mythic Plus things. Like, for example, if you're Night Fae, you get a skip in the dungeon. If you're Venthyr, you get a buff. Obviously they're in specific dungeons or whatever, but the fact that those are available in Mythic Plus essentially means that if you're in a very competitive team pushing for higher level keys or whatever, you essentially have to have one of every covenant in your group. That means 4 of your 5 players have to be different covenants, which means if, for example, I don't want to be Night Fae, but we've already got a Night Fae in my Mythic Plus group, I then, we have everything but a Night Fae. I have to go Night Fae. Otherwise, my group is going to go find a Night Fae tank because they want that skip for, yes, that one specific dungeon. But if you're running with the same people every week, you're going to want to make sure that you're not switching out, this player for that player just so that you can go run this one dungeon to get this one bonus. that means you either have to have 4 different covenants in your party, or if you don't, you just want to play whatever, you've got to have an alt, or somebody in that group has to have an alt with the appropriate covenant to make use of that benefit. If you don't get that buff, then you're not going to push as fast as all the other teams, and you're not as competitive, which just means you just lose. I think that is a really dumb choice.
I do have still a little bit of faith in Blizzard as far as, what you're talking about, the Covenant-specific buffs or shortcuts or, something like that, where in Plaguefall, one of the first dungeons that you do in Bastion, there is a spear that you can pick up if you are Kyrian, and it deals a decent amount of damage to a certain amount of enemies, I'm pretty sure, or a boss or something like that. They nerfed that significantly in Mythic Plus. So if they nerf all the other things, or not even, even if they just nerf them to the point where they're minuscule to, if you take the time out to go and get them, to use them, then it's just a waste of time. Then I think it'll still be fine.
Okay, so my point of view and the whole reason that this argument came about is because, okay, to be fair, I wish they would just disable them in Mythic Plus. Thank you. I wish I would like to see them disabled in Mythic Plus, just so that we don't have the people whining.
Well, take power away from covenants, and that's gone. Because then, if player power isn't tied to covenant, then by that logic, Mythic Plus power wouldn't be tied to a covenant, and it's a problem solved.
Or they can just disable those buffs and shortcuts and everything in Mythic Plus only.
I just said.
Did you get them?
Yep, I got them.
Okay, good.
Sorry.
Well, here's one of the things, right? They want to try to give players agency. However, the problem with that is that when it comes with a power time, it really, really makes it awkward. Like, sure, one of those dungeons is, I think, the Night Fae one, correct me if I'm wrong. It's something absurd, like those mushrooms can give you like a 10% damage increase for like a couple minutes, which is absolutely bonkers. But when you look at some of the other ones, like another one of the dungeons, it's like, oh, when you kill a mob, they drop this thing, and if you pick it up for like, I think it's like 10 seconds, you get like a 1% damage increase, and you can stack it, but it doesn't refresh stacks. So like, yeah, you might have some cool strategies, or yeah, it might feel really impactful, but if they're planning on making it like a competitive scene, like an esport kind of thing, I feel like they have to just hit the middle ground. And they have to just say, well, if people want to compete at a high level and on the leaderboards, either they have to make the decision of, yes, take away the player's power linked to their their choice, which would feel bad for the casual players. But for the higher end players, all of them are going to say this is an absolute stupid source, because I shouldn't need a Night Fae to get 10% damage when fighting this certain boss, and that's going to make or break doing a 25 or something like that. So see, when they're that steep, I think that's the problem. If it's something that like is almost irrelevant, or if it's a fun flavor-based thing, sure, maybe I can get behind it. But when it gives players a feel like they need to do something in order to attain higher content, which they don't necessarily need it, but it may make their run easier, I think that's where the problem lies. Is because you're giving
the issue though. The Night Fae one is literally a shortcut. So if taking the shortcut means you cut a minute off of your dungeon run, that is a competitive edge that, whether it's an MDI team or somebody... Look, I'm not talking about the people that are just doing a 15 to get their weekly, to get their item for the week. Like, that's not who I'm talking about. I'm talking about the people who want to push keys. The people like, Nick or, Cappy or Sage or, any of those people that like to push keys. Kiki and Shantra come to mind. Like, if you want to push keys and you want to be competitive, if you can save literally a minute, full 60 seconds or 2 minutes or whatever by taking a skip because you have the one person with a covenant to do that, that is like game changing. And especially when you look at an MDI and that 1% buff you were talking about that, stacks but doesn't refresh or whatever, if you don't think that is going to be massively utilized, then that is just, you're crazy. In the MDI, they're allowed to, gear up with whatever gear they want, whatever corruptions they want and current stuff. They're going to be able to pick everything that they want. They're going to tailor their entire group around that. And if you look at, BDG doing, a no no Venthyr or whatever in this dungeon, and then you look at like, Golden Guardians or something, and they have a Venthyr in the dungeon that gives them, 1% stacking or whatever, that person's damage will be drastically higher. You're looking at the best of the best and doing the Mythic Plus, that's MDI. Then yes, it's going to be a big difference. For most of us, it's not going to be. The problem is everybody looks at those people, sees their opinions, and goes, yeah, that's right, because they're the best and they know what's right. And I personally don't think that that's the right approach. Just do away with that whole thing, and you don't have to have that argument.
Yeah. So part of it that I was getting after, and I think we still share some of the same core fundamental points, is if they just get rid of it, that fixes the whole problem. I completely agree. If they still want to have it and they want to make players feel like they're making a choice, linking power is always going to feel bad. Doesn't matter who you are. And yeah, there might be some fallback in groups looking for, a Night Fae tank for this dungeon because that's what they need or whatever. That's going to feel really shitty, like all across the board. But if they make it so that it's almost irrelevant, I think it would still be happy to have. Because if you're like a Night Fae and it's like, oh, well, I get like a small little buff, or, maybe I get like a small absorb shield or something that's irrelevant. Or maybe like, having like a time cut via a route is something that's a bit extreme. But if it was something that was irrelevant or just a flavor thing, or maybe if it was just not related to how quickly you do the dungeon, but if it was like a rep thing or something that just didn't matter for the speed at which you do a dungeon, I'd be fine with having that. But again, the problem is you're telling a bunch of players that their agency doesn't matter because suddenly you have to form a certain group with those certain things, and that's taking away the player's choice. I think that's where the fundamental problem lies the most. I would just say just do away with it.
And ultimately, they're not thinking about... They may be thinking about, like, oh, yeah, we're going to have player choice, and, if you're Night Fae, you're going to have this skip, and it's going to save you a minute or whatever. And, maybe they're thinking, well, MDI teams, they're going to have one of everything because, whatever. They don't care about that difference. The problem that they're not thinking about is the fact that if anything in the game is tied to power, everyone will go for that. Very few people play a class simply because they enjoy that class, even when it's shit. You are an anomaly. You play an Ellie Shaman when it's shit because you enjoy Ellie Shaman. But most people, if Ellie Shaman was as shit as it's been for as long as it's been, most other people would be like, you know what? I'm going to go play a different class. And especially if you're competitive. If you're in limit, they're not bringing an Ellie Shaman to, Carapace, for example. They're stacking mages and paladins and hunters and warriors. Like, just look at any World First Kill, and you can see that. Look at all of the MDIs. Like, this entire last season, we had one Shadow Priest in the MDI, and that team was eliminated right away. Now, don't get me wrong. Just making it to the MDI means a lot. And the fact that a team with a Shadow Priest made it to the MDI is like, holy shit. It changed perceptions on what a Shadow Priest can do. Before that guy showed up in the MDI, Shadow Priest, you would not get invited to any keys. Unless you had a group and you made it on your own. Because nobody is bringing Shadow Priest. They're garbage. They're not Fire Mages. They're not BM Hunters. They're not Demon Hunters.
Or Rogues.
DKs.
Anyway.
Yeah. But
Well,
that's the issue, is if you're not one of those things, you're not going to get brought. And if there's player power assigned or associated in any way, whether it's through Covenant or whatever, you will most likely spend more time in queue looking for a Mythic Plus than you will in Mythic Plus looking for gear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What were you going to say, Nick?
I was just gonna say that they even in MDI right now they still don't really bring rogues because that's what a BM hunter is for. They do more damage. They can literally do almost the same exact things that all rogues can do. So.
Well, the highest push groups, like the world top pushers that are doing like 30s, 31s in the very rare cases, every single one of them, it's the exact same comp. It's a demon hunter, it's a rogue, and it's a mage on every single one. They don't change anything because that's just what they found to be the best. But I guess that's a little bit of a different topic.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah, slightly. But I don't know. Yeah, I think that as long as it's not related to player choice, if it's something irrelevant, I would be fine with them having it. But if it's going to change the competitive scene, which, to be fair, most of the game, when the competitive scene or the MDI comes out, that has a trickle-down effect. When people are watching the World First Race, or when people are looking at charts to see what does the most damage, that's usually when people make their decisions about what they want to play or how they want to do a dungeon or how they handle a certain raid fight, because it's the trickle down effect. They're watching the pros. Pros are saying this is the best, or at least this is what they're using, so I'm going to use the same thing. Do I think that that's going to change the whole community, though? No, because there's a lot of clashing information there. If you want to be the best, for example, if you want to be the best arcane mage, you might find out after some theory crafting and doing the math with a bunch of the people that picking Night Fae is the best, for example. But then you might see an MDI team where they have an arcane mage and he's Venthyr, and then all of a sudden you have to ask yourself, well, do I pick the Venthyr because they picked it for the MDI team, or do I pick it because that's what they were picking in Raid, or do I pick this other one because this other class is good? So there's going to be a lot of clashing information on top of that. So I really hope it's not going to matter, and I really doubt that with all the other things going on that people are going to be super concerned with having every single one of those buffs, unless you are the absolute top echelon of player and you're pushing the highest possible content. They just need to make it that it's not as impactful. Less impactful, and then it will be totally fine, and people will play the way they want to play or whatever they think is numerically the best way to play.
I think that's what Blizzard is trying to grasp is when they say player choice, that's what they mean right there. Is
the problem?
You have
Go ahead. Go ahead.
You have, like you said, conflicting information of the Venthyr and Meeps. You are distracting the fuck out of me. Please stop. You have, I'm going to use Mage as an example. You have the Venthyr, which is Mirrors of Torment, which is, quote unquote, BIS right now. But then you go to Maldraxxus and the Necrolords, and you have Skeletal Magi, which it's only a 10% damage increase. But if they nerfed or buffed one of the other to the point where they're, just ever so slightly, that's when the player choice comes into effect. Is what do I think, is going to be better for my playstyle, or what is going to be better for the content that I do mostly, which is PvP or Mythic Plus or Raid or even just questing. What's going to be best for what I like to do for the content that I do? And I think that's what Blizzard was trying to say when they made this Covenant power connection and all this crap that they're trying to push on us. If they just balance it into a good way, then I think it'll be fine, because I'm okay with power being connected like this. It just needs to be balanced correctly, and them saying that it's near impossible for them to balance it, they can do it. If I literally just sat here for 5 minutes thinking about it, they can do it too.
The problem is when you have casual players that are just playing or whatever, that's one thing, because they're not going to really matter. They're not going to put that 5% to be a difference, or that 10% to be a difference. When you're looking at teams like MDI teams that are whatever, or like really high skilled players, that's where it's going to make the difference. The issue that I mostly have with it is when you have... Okay, so if I want to go do a Mythic Plus right now, and I'm a tank, right? I can queue up for a Mythic Plus. There's things that people will look at. My Raider IO score. If I don't meet whatever IO score they're looking for, they're not going to look at me. If they've been looking for a 2K tank, or let's say they're looking for a 3K tank, and they haven't found one over like 20 minutes, maybe they'll look for a 2500 tank. And if I'm that 2500 tank and I queue up and I'm like, all right, cool. Well, first thing, they're going to look for a warrior first, because right now they're BIS. If after 20 minutes they still don't get a warrior, and I'm exaggerating the numbers on purpose, but if they'll wait a certain amount of time, and if they don't get XYZ class first, then they'll look for the next class. If I'm the least desirable tank class according to what they specifically want, and I'm, not what they desire as far as their Mythic IO score or whatever, and then on top of that, I'm a Covenant that they don't want because they already have a Kyrian in the group, and I'm Kyrian, you're adding so many levels of undesirableness to the point where you're just saying, it's a throwaway. Now, there's going to be the other teams where it's like, we don't care about your IO, get in here. We don't care whatever class you're playing, get in here. Or, they'll be like, yeah, we need a Kyrian, get in here. There's going to be those too. But predominantly, more often than not, you're going to spend time looking for a group. And then, I don't know, I'm kind of predicting that if things stay this way, You'll mostly see it as a DPS because like tanks, they'll end up just inviting a tank of anything because if you're a good tank, you're going to get into a group. Same thing for healers. The DPS is where it's really going to suffer. You're going to see like looking for one range DPS Kyrian, and if you're not Kyrian, don't even apply because you're not going to get into that group. And that is where my issue is. When you start dividing the player base even further than you've already divided it, I don't like it.
That's also another, like I said, easy fix. Of course, I know it's not an easy fix, but it's the Shadowlands. Everyone talks to one another, of course. They are all connected to Orbos, right? Yeah, there's going to be some alliances probably between some of the covenants. If you have the Kyrian and the Night Fae as an alliance, and the Necrolords and the Venthyr as an alliance, you can easily cut those requirements in half because, I need to get the Kyrian Spear in Plaguefall because it does X amount of damage to Y adds and everything like that, but we don't have a Kyrian. Oh wait, you're Night Fae? Here, you can use the spear. We trust you guys. Let's go ahead and allow you guys to pick this up as well. It's not going to be as powerful as a Kyrian, but it'll still be just as viable to still go out of your way to go ahead and pick up the spear so that way you can do this X damage to those Y adds or this Z boss.
Well, I think the problem with that, though, is that the MDI groups, what are they going to do? They're going to say, well, it's a power drop. Well, then we're still not going to do it. It would be cool as if they were allianced, or if you could have, like a subset of the Covenant. So, like, if you're a Venthyr, maybe you're also friends with Maldraxx's people for whatever reason, or maybe you do like a quest line, and maybe if you're exalted with both, you can share the benefits or whatever between those two. That might open it up, but if you say that one is a little bit less powerful, everyone's still going to look for, well, the MDI team, they brought a Kyrian because it does an extra, X% of damage. Why would we ever nerf our damage just for the sake of, running a different person? They would just run a different person, and that's the trickle-down effect. Everyone else would go the same way. At least that's how I feel it might go.
And that's something.
I like that idea, by the way.
And that's something that I wanted to say about Jay saying how Blizzard is just splitting the player base even further. We did that to ourselves. Like, the splitting of the player base, the community did that to itself. Like, with the whole IO system.
Oh, yeah.
I agree. And the ranking system, the IO system, we did that to ourselves, I agree. But Blizzard's aware it's a thing. They know it's a thing. They know that separation is happening. Why are you adding another layer?
Right.
Yeah, it makes it kind of rough in that regard.
They don't know how to subtract. They only add.
And before we
they subtracted. Do you not remember the great pruning of Cataclysm, or was it Mop?
Mop.
I think it was Mop.
Mop, yeah, Mop. When they got rid of like a quarter of every class's skills, and we're finally getting them all back. That's fantastic. Not all, but most. That's fantastic. But the Great Prune was like, ugh, come on.
And before we
was the only reason why I played one tier in that.
away from Mythic Plus, you guys have all seen the changes in affixes. How do you guys feel about them? Do you think they were positive across the board? Do you think they were negative across the board?
I think regardless of how they were changed, I think it brings more fluidity to the game, and it brings more interest to the game when they have a different style set. So, if, say, this year they have, 20 different affixes, I'm just random with throwing numbers, and then next year they change 4 of those affixes, or maybe they remove 4 affixes and add 4 new ones to the rotation, that's just going to make the game more replayable. That's just going to give more replayability factor. There's one of the affixes that I'm not super happy about, and the name of it at the moment escapes me. It was just a rework on one of the previous ones, but generally speaking, I think that it's a good thing, regardless of how good or how bad the affix is, or if it's a push affix, or if it makes it too hard to do a dungeon or anything like that. I think that it's good that they have them there, because that's kind of the whole point, is to give a replayability factor and give you an extra challenge to a dungeon, whether or not it's impossibly hard or it's just something really, really minor like Volcanic.
I mean, I personally like a lot of the changes they did. Some of them I feel like are not necessarily needed. I'm looking at you, Explosive. I mean, the developer's note for explosives, I marked this down in my notes of something to talk about because I knew it would come up. The developer's note was, The goal here is to make explosives easier to see and target, as they're less likely to be directly on top of other enemies. I have these things called nameplates that appear on top of an enemy's health. I've never had an issue targeting an explosive. So
Well,
I don't understand that developer note at all.
not everyone uses nameplate add-ons. There's still people that play base UI.
Then they're
Yeah.
doing it wrong, and they shouldn't be. You know,
I would 100% agree with that, but there's also options and settings within those nameplate add-ons that need to be enabled or disabled, like stacking nameplates or layered nameplates, where you can't always click on those explosives or you can't always find those explosives. I'm okay with this, with either change if they would have kept it
Oh,
the
I'm
same,
okay with
or
the
if,
change too. I just think it was like, really?
I mean, I feel like it was more of a flavor kind of change than anything else.
Here's the thing. My main complaint about that is the amount of time that they put into thinking that solution and coding that solution. Even if it was 5 minutes on somebody's smoke break, that's 5 minutes on somebody's smoke break they could have put into the maw, which currently looks really bad.
Yeah, we'll get into that.
Oh
Yeah, we will get into that.
Mhm.
But the rest of the changes, I like them all. I think the changes to bursting is massive. The fact that it can be dispelled now, all the disc priests are praising because now they can actually do a bursting week
Yeah.
without needing a monster nearby to penance to keep their group alive. I think it's great. I think, and as a current Shadow Priest, I think it's fantastic if bursting was currently dispellable, because then everybody would bring a Shadow Priest on a bursting week, and they'd just be like, hey, when we pull this 10 stack, we're going to nuke it right away. Just spell. And we'll be like, okay, cool, master spell, boom, I'm useful.
I don't know
But
if
yeah,
you.
you're splitting the community again by only wanting to bring one class on a certain.
I don't know if you realize, Jay. Blizzard abandoned BFA months ago.
Oh, I noticed. I'm just saying, certain things like that do make other classes a little bit more desirable where they currently aren't. Right now, Shadow Priests are in a good spot, but if it was dispellable this whole expansion, they would have been more desirable, at least on bursting weeks, where, if you didn't have a Disc Priest in your group, you could just pull really big and have a Shadow Priest Master Spell on a 10 stack. Like, it would have been good, I think. But probably going to get flamed from Cappy saying that Shadow Priests are in a good spot right now. Is that?
Yep.
Yeah.
Air quote,
Yeah,
that's
he
fine.
did. Of course he did. But
It's not air quotes if you're typing it, Rise.
Okay, fine.
yeah, that's a
Just
good point.
quotes.
But no, I mean, look, they could be worse. They could be survival hunters.
Elf, if you're hearing this, change
can
your
hear
class.
I can hear him right now yelling, "Give me lead."
Well, you guys want to wrap up the Mythic Plus discussion with like how you feel overall about going into Shadowlands? What the Mythic Plus is going to be like for you personally? Like, are you excited? Are you disappointed? Nonplussed?
I'll go first because I'm going to be quick.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm actually going to be quick. Despite all of the shitting on it that I said, I'm super excited. I like all of the changes except for the player power outside to the Covenant. Despite that, I'm going to be playing a Covenant that is going to be wanted probably for that skip. So but even if they get rid of that, all of the dungeons look fun. All of the affixes look pretty cool. The 3 new ones look awesome. I'm excited. Go ahead, Nick. See, I was quick. Fuckers.
2 hours later. I am 100% excited for, of course, new dungeons, new affixes that they said that they weren't putting in, but they still somehow snuck them under our noses. I'm really excited for what new seasonal affixes are going to be coming along. Just new everything in general is always good, in my opinion, at least. My personal favorite out of all the new affixes is probably Storming, like I said earlier. I can't wait to see melee just being thrown into the air.
What about you, Rez?
I am excited to feel the new feeling of, a new dungeon, a new Mythic Plus. I am in the same boat with Jay. I really hope that they make a more balanced decision on player power and agency affecting higher end content like that. But if that's how it's going to be throughout the game, so be it. It might affect the player base, but I am personally very excited to see new Mythic Plus, having it feel not just the same old staleness with new affixes. More specifically, because of I think all these new dungeons are going to be so good, I think that it's probably going to be the best dungeon feeling has ever felt in WoW. It's going to be top tier.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that.
I think they've learned from all the shit that they've done bad in the time, and over the last 2 expansions, have got Mythic Plus kind of worked out a little bit.
Well, this is only the 3rd expansion that they're pulling in Mythic Plus. Yeah, they did Challenge Mode, which was completely different compared to what it is now.
Yeah.
Legion, it was kind of an experimental idea, and then BFA, they added a little bit onto it. Now they're really starting to get into the Mythic Plus and really getting it kicked off because of MDI and everything like that now.
I just mean, like, when Legion, when it was started, it was very clear that it was an idea that they were like, okay, we thought of this idea, and it worked pretty good. And then BFA it was improved on, and everything that I'm seeing, minus the Covenant bit, looks like they're just improving on it even more. It looks like it's becoming even more streamlined, in a sense of, like, it doesn't appear that there's going to be too many hitches along the way where you just got issues with certain dungeons and higher scaling. I don't know. That's all going to be determined as we get there. But I've been watching a lot of JB's stream, and I haven't seen anything, and I don't watch them all the time, so it's hard to say this, but I haven't seen anything where I've been like, whoa, that is way overtuned. I'm sure there is some, but that'll all get smoothed out. But for the most part, everything that I've seen, I've been like, that looks good. So
I agree. What about you, Meeps? We didn't really get your hot take, even though you're not super into Mythic Plus.
I'm always I'm always excited about new dungeons, just to play with, new experiences. Until the 100th, the 200th, the 300th time I run each of them, which is part of the reason I don't like Mythic Plus. Even though the affixes change how you approach pulls, it's still the same dungeon to me. It's not that exciting. It's just doing Halls of Valor again. I just have.
Do you have for MOP again?
See, challenge modes are a bit different.
Fair enough.
Or maybe that's what ground me out on the idea of running dungeons over and over again. All the many dungeons I ran in Mists. Like whenever the time walking comes up for Mists, I have PTSD going back through those. Like, I can't do them with pugs, just because I'll go and do, like, all right, this is what I've done a million times before. I know this is how you do this pull. This is how you do this pull. This is how you skip that pull. This is how you CC that mob. I know everything. I know everything about those. Like, even crazy shit, like in Siege of Nuzao Temple. That last little bridge that you go across to the last boss? The mobs that stand there will throw bricks at you, and they won't move unless you have aggro and you white hit them and then move away. That's the only time they will move. You have to white hit them and move away, and that'll make them move. I know that shit. I shouldn't know that shit. I don't want to know that. I know everything about every mob in Mists of Pandaria dungeons, and I think maybe that had a bit of as probably a big part of why I don't like dungeons anymore.
Fair enough. Well, speaking of dungeons, I don't know if you guys have been able to see much of it. What are you guys hopeful, or what have you guys seen about the raid that is going to be exciting?
Castle Nathria.
I'm excited. Fucking vampires.
The
I
aesthetic,
love vampires. I'm sorry.
The aesthetic for me, which I think is what both of you will also say, because I think we are all in the same group that we like vampires. That raid looks phenomenal. Like the lighting, the aesthetic, like everything about it. Even some of the boss encounters and their like spells and what they look like and what they're casting, all of that fits perfectly into that true Venthyr theme, which I think is super fucking cool. Because some of our raids, they have a theme, but they don't really fit super well with the expansion, or at least the parts of the expansion we're in.
Right.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
Like Shriekwing, for instance, it's gonna be it's going to be a lousy boss just because it's the first boss, so it has to be lousy.
Always is, yeah.
Right. But as you go further in, the mechanics get really creative, which I really appreciate. Especially, I don't want to lead off. I want to talk about the last boss last, but oh boy, that one in particular I'm looking forward to. But what about you guys? From what you've seen of the raid, are there any bosses in particular besides the last one that really stand out or are really interesting?
I have one that I want to bring up right away that kind of ties back to one of the things that I said about the dungeons, actually, of this tier. Some of those dungeons, they have some really cool abilities. They have some really unique, cool-looking fights. I'm trying to remember the name of the boss, but I'm pretty sure it's the second to last boss of the instance that has the gate system. That is something that has never been seen. Like, there's no boss, to my knowledge, in WoW or dungeon boss or anything that has a mechanic that has worked like that. The premise of the mechanic, two players get chosen with portals, and you drop them somewhere in the raid room to deal with the other mechanics. Like, at some point, an ad goes up and it tries to follow you, and you go through the teleporter to the other side of the room, and then it has to walk across the room to try to get to you, and then you take the teleporter back, then you can damage the boss. So, like, having really cool new mechanics that I don't think have ever been dealt with before is the thing that I'm most looking forward to, specifically in that boss, and then, again, we'll talk about him later, but also in Sire Denathrius himself. Some of those fights just look so new. They look so refreshed. It doesn't feel like a previous raid fight. This mechanic that you can pick out doesn't seem like the mechanic we dealt with last raid. It's all really, really cool.
There's 3 that I'm super excited for. Artificer Zymox, which is the one that Rise had mentioned with the portals, looks awesomely fun. New mechanics. I really like Sun King's Salvation. I love Kael'thas, and I think that's going to be a pretty cool fight. The Council of Blood is my third kind of standout. I fucking love vampires. I don't know if you knew this. Like, I love all vampires. Bram Stoker is my spirit animal. But the fact that we get a whole council of vampires to fight is going to be fucking dope. I'm so excited. And, dude, the fucking model for Baroness Frida, you guys check that out? It's a fucking babe of a vampire is all I'm saying. She's going to fucking murder some people.
We're gonna
Blood
go
everywhere. It's gonna be fucking good.
ICC all over again.
Yup. Nah, but those are my 3 that I'm most looking forward to, aside from Denathrius. Everybody wants to fight Denathrius. It's gonna be amazing. But aside from that, those are my 3. Honorable mention to Lady Enerva Darkfang.
I think I'm gonna throw everyone for a loop here. I can't remember their name, where you have to empty the vials of anima in order to kind of distract certain abilities from happening, or enforce certain abilities happen. I think that's Council of Blood, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's Council.
Yeah, that's Council of Blood.
So that's my number 3. My number 2 is Shriekwing, because it's kind of the same first normal boss and stuff like that, but having to LOS certain things.
And he's a giant gargoyle.
Who doesn't like gargoyles? I grew up on the animated series Gargoyles, okay? That shit was amazing.
It was amazing.
But my number 1 I'm actually really excited for to see back but see something similar come back is Sludge Fist. I like Patchwork fight. I loved Patchwork in Nax, even though I didn't do original Patchwork. But it was still a really cool fight, even though you literally just stand there and you don't do anything. It's a tank and spank. But it's actually intensive on the healers as well as the tanks, which not very intensive fights. Like 90% of the fights out there right now are not intensive on the tanks at all. They're kind of snooze fests, to be honest. To have something like that return back is, in my books, really fucking cool.
Plus, every raid tier, you gotta have like an Ursoc or a
Shadhar,
a Patchwork, a Shadhar. You gotta have one. The obligatory Patchwork boss, and That was one that I had, I watched the videos for it or, read the write-ups, and I was like, okay, so it's a patchwork fight. And then I just kind of like moved on. But you're totally right. Like, patchwork fights, there is only usually one per tier, one every other tier, and every time they're always fun. Like Ursoc, I remember this is basically an Ursoc reskin, let's be honest. But like undead version, I think that's dope. I really liked it, and I think this one's gonna be good too. Yeah,
I never did Ursoc, so I couldn't say or put any feedback into that. But to what Otter is saying, Very Mathras, in my opinion, is not a patchwork fight.
No, not at all.
No.
No way.
I don't think he understands what a patchwork fight is.
Well, okay, on heroic and normal, yeah.
Definitely.
When you hit mythic and it's literally, okay, we pulled the boss and we're dead.
Right.
Yeah, that gets a little rough.
What was the second boss in WoD? Sorry, I know
Butcher.
You can go to either one of the three. Butcher, yes. Butcher is another example of a patchwork fight, even in Mythic. Sure, you have the ads that come in, but literally you kill them and nobody's, it's no big deal.
Well, your tank had to be within a certain distance from you in order for you to not get one shot.
Yep. And you had to have somebody else in the raid come up with an immunity or some sort of debuff to soak an axe throw, the debuff for like 15 seconds or whatever, so they wouldn't die immediately. That was an additional mechanic. Ursoc, same thing. Hit one tank, hit another tank, charge somebody in the raid. Everybody that's in between it reduces the amount of damage that eventual person takes. That kind of thing. Still patchwork fight. Veramothras is not the same.
Not Mythic, anyway.
Mm-mm.
I mean, the same could be said for Shadhar, though, as well. Yeah, there's not very many mechanics, but it's... Well, actually, yeah.
Shadhar's a patchwork fight.
Now that I think... I didn't think of the tank abilities, that's why.
Yeah.
Where you're getting wombo comboed and shit.
Oh, yeah. Tank misses a taunt, and tank dead.
Are there any things about the raid, before we obviously get to some of the ones that we really, really like... are there any things about the raid that you guys have seen that you don't like?
Shriekwing.
You just said you liked it!
Yeah, right.
It's a love-hate relationship, I'm sorry.
Oh, fair enough.
I'm a little confused.
I actually...
Never mind.
I appreciate the art and, like, how different it is, but still, at the end of the day, I don't like that... To me, it's already got the HFC effect of, well, coming into another room. Let me guess. Black and green. Another room? Black and green. What about black and green? And except this one's going to be, let me get red. Yep. I think they're going with the blood theme here, guys. Yep, that's red. Red. Yep, that room's red. I don't like the one... I like the overall theme idea, but just how much they hammer on it, I'm not a fan.
But
I think they might let up on that, depending on where you go.
Yeah.
You're not spending all the time in the Cathedral Major, where that big one screenshot is with the, the, inside the cathedral. That's not where all the fights take place. Like, you're going to end up in other places. I'm sure the theme will change. Sorry, Nick, go ahead.
Well, what I was going to say is, yeah, there is a fight that you do outside, and you do get a break from that red theme that you're talking about. But once you start putting in different colors and things like that in different rooms, you start taking away from that theme. You have a gray and red, room. You're going to walk in there and be like, okay, yeah, a fucking vampire lives in here. Whereas you go down the hall and to the left, and, third door on your right is, Shriekwing, and it's not gray and red.
It's dark.
Yeah. Like, what?
Or you enter Kael'thas's bedroom and it's just gold and green and like there's some browns there and you're like, where the fuck did I go?
Yeah,
it's got the purple mood light
through another portal, or
like Old War when you head to Freya. That felt so. What?
And see, I loved that
right
though.
There
forest
is
here?
a perfect example of
what I
was talking about, not sticking to a theme.
Yeah,
I enjoyed that. Like, it felt all right in that sense, because I don't know. I guess I'm I get over themed pretty easily because every raid just feels like it. It's
You're a
just
masochist. We get it.
One
I think there's
Go
one
ahead.
fight that I'm not looking forward to just because maybe I watched it when I was in a bad mood, unlikely, but my initial reaction for Altamore the Huntsman was is it over? Oh, no, it's not. Okay.
Yeah.
That's the only one that I can name that just looks fucking boring.
Well,
I have
that's only a
sneaky
second
suspicion-
boss.
I
think
know,
on
but
Mythic-
at least Shriekwing is somewhat interesting. This one's just not.
Well, I mean, if you really break down all the abilities of Shriekwing, it's boring as shit as well. But what like I said, how I hate it but I love it is that exactly right there. Is it's introducing new kind of mechanics and features of having to LOS or play Ring Around the Rosie with a boss. But that's literally the only thing that was added to that boss. Yeah, it's only the first one, but still, it's still trying to add something different while still staying the same, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
what about
Yeah, I
you,
think
Rez?
I have a very sneaking suspicion that guilds are going to see Hungering Destroyer, and they are literally going to get rid of every single melee that they have, and it's going to be very, very sad because that fight looks like a nightmare, but I have a feeling it's going to be really fun when we're killing it.
What about Elganoth now?
Yeah, same. Like just the fact that like that fight is so like spread reliant and everyone needs to be really far away and you need to with all the orbs and stuff like that. I just feel like that's going to be a fight where it's like, oh yeah, the top guilds on Mythic, they're bringing one melee and it's like a demon hunter or something. Like
We
like
are going to struggle on that one.
yeah, I feel like it's going to be really toxic to progression rating as far as like you really want to have a certain comp. I mean, I know we could do it with 5-6 melee, but just like it's going to be so hard being a melee and getting into that fight and being like, I have to do what and how often? Every like 10 seconds? Well, I don't get to damage? Okay, I guess that's fine. It's going to be really, really difficult for a lot of people.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
So, do we want to go over... well, we pretty much went over most of the bosses of note. So, what about Sire Denathrius? How do you guys feel about the big bad boy?
I can't remember exactly which two bosses, Meeps, that I said it was like, but I immediately, when I saw the first stream of that boss, when they were doing PTR testing on Heroic and Normal, I immediately looked at that boss and like, this is the boss that Meeps is going to want to fight. This reminds me of Mythic Blackhand, and then I couldn't remember what other boss I related it to. But I was immediately like, yep, Meeps is going to want to fight this boss every day for the rest of his life.
But Blackhand was so good, in my opinion. I thought it was great because it brought so many different levels of, no pun intended, but so many different levels of mechanics and gameplay and coordination that was needed in order to do that boss.
Yeah, and also just, I think, like, a part of it for me that looks really cool, because I never got to fight Mythic Blackhand when it was current, but, like, having that feeling of, like, the boss just gets so angry that just, like, part of the castle just breaks away, and you just fall, and fall, and fall, and all of a sudden you're in a new arena that was under him, and then suddenly the tone changes from the start of the fight, it seemed pretty easy, to, like, the phase 2 is much more upbeat with a lot more ads, and a lot more positioning, and faster mechanics coming out. Oh, and it was like a Mythic Argus, with the sights that come out. So you're like constantly dodging everything and the platforms just break and you feel like you're just falling through this empty tower and just going from zone to zone, fighting them at different points. It really feels like almost like a theatrical, almost like an anime fight scene where just like they blow up the castle and then they just keep going.
And then on top of that, you got all of his followers and stuff standing there watching this fight happen, cheering him on, and you just like look around and you're like, what the fuck?
And hopping in tanks to come run you over.
Yeah. Well, if you're Blackhand, yeah, but like this one, I think it matches really well thematically. I mean, obviously he's a vampire, so it's got to be thematically vampire, blah blah blah. But the fact that he thematically just fucking torments you the whole time, the slow destruction, taking you to his observatory, and you've got all of his like fanatics around you, like watching and joining in on the fight, and all of that stuff. And then it's like a cycle of torment that he just takes you even further every time. It just elevates you to a whole new level of horror. And man, I am so in.
I'm excited to see a mythic only phase coming off of N'Zoth, who has a mythic only phase that was really lackluster. Like whenever I first saw it, I thought, "Oh, we're going to the mythic only phase." Oh, it's just okay.
Wait, N'Zoth has a mythic only phase?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, it does?
Essentially.
Sorry, I'll have to.
Well, technically it's in heroic too, because after we kill him, we get transported there. But there's just a loot chest.
Right.
Yeah.
Hoi, 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 hoi.
Does that even count? I don't even know.
But I came, some of my favorite fights had just a mythic only phase way out of left field, like Blackhand, for instance, or wait, was that mythic only breaking the floor? I don't remember. Okay.
No, it wasn't.
That was heroic.
Garrosh. All right, then Garrosh had a mythic only phase that was just like, whoa, okay. So this is a whole new fight we're doing out of nowhere. I'm in.
Yep.
Hellfire Citadel's last boss.
Yep.
The
Archimond.
Yeah.
Archimond, the mythic only was amazing.
Yep. So I honestly don't think there's going to be a mythic only phase. I think they're just going to add a couple mechanics and ratchet the tuning up. But the reason I brought it up is because of this fight overall. Looking at it, it is in a prime position to have an amazing mythic only phase.
Can you imagine if you hit 25% or whatever, like whatever the normal part where you just keep going, and all of a sudden it just drops into like a dark part of the maw? Like, how fucking cool would that be?
Right.
You're just like in some you're just connected to the maw, and there's like a bunch of shit going on. Like either like the jailer is partly there, and he like fights with him, or like he empowers him just a Super Saiyan fight, like Mythic Argus was. Something like that would be really fucking cool.
Or Ragnaros growing legs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry,
I think something would be cool for Darnathris is have him teleport everyone back to the Council of Blood room where all the vials of anima are. He stuns everyone for 10-15 seconds while he literally walks around the room, daintily grabs a bottle of anima, drinks it, and every bottle that he drinks, he gains 5% extra health, and his health goes back up while having more damage being dealt out or him dealing more damage. And then that's where you finish him off, is right in there, or something along those lines, where he takes you back into a previous room of the castle,
or you fight him through multiple rooms, like you fight him all the way out the front door.
Yeah, that would be really cool. This is my castle now, bitch.
And every time you get to a new room, he like breaks open a wall, revealing a secret cache of anima, where he just drinks more. Turns out he's an alcoholic. What?
Well, that's literally what a vampire does. Is they're bloodthirsty little fuckers, and that's kind of what they are in this. Is they're anima hungry, so that's what they want is more anima.
Yeah.
WoW's first 40-minute fight.
Dude, I'm down.
I would be very down for a 40-minute fight.
Enough of these 10-minute, 15-minute fights, right? Give me a fucking half an hour fight.
Let's get 3 or 4
Please.
bloodlusts.
I just want one. I'm alone in this. I know I am, but
no, I'm so with you with 60 people.
I so want a marathon fight. No, I'm okay with 20, man, but I want a marathon fight. Something that takes 20 or 30 minutes to kill. I think would be great. Like, even if it's an optional raid, whatever, just one fight in the raid, like a
I think that
all those dragons in Wrath. The storm elemental and the fire elemental and the whatever, all those fucking dungeons, the raid dungeons. Give me like a 30-minute fight. I want it so bad.
I think that would work really well in like open world scenario bosses or something like that where you have to.
Then you got people coming over to PvP.
Crash the server
in the middle of that. Fuck that. Crashing a server could happen. Nah.
Well, I think the only problem.
You know what? Give me 30 minutes straight of Soccer Mom. Please.
The only problem
You
though
can
with
leave
a
the call now,
30
Jay.
The only problem
My
with a
bad.
30-minute raid fight, though, is that's going to be really toxic for progression. Because imagine it's a 30-minute fight and you wipe at minute 20. Every wipe that you have is going to be at minute 20, and that's just going to make it feel like shit. I'm fine with a marathon fight, like a 10, 12-minute fight that has like a cool secret phase. I'm totally down
It's
for
not a
that. I
marathon.
remember Mythic
20
Gul'dan.
plus, come on.
Yeah, like Mythic Gul'dan when it was like, okay, we're at the 10-minute mark, and all of a sudden it's like we phased them, and everyone's just like, oh,
The
there's
fight just
more?
started.
Yeah, the fight just started. Like, healers are at half mana. Like, everyone's almost dead, but, like, we're going to keep going, figure this out. Like, I'm down for a fight that's long. But if it's too long, then that kind of jeopardizes the progression aspect of the game, I think.
Cool. 60-minute fight. You're in? Excellent.
Yeah, let's go.
So, where do you think we'll go from Castle Nathria? Like, what other raids do you think we'll see?
You know, I was thinking about this for a little bit, and I was curious because it seems like every zone that you level through has kind of like a BBEG. For people that don't know what that means, the big bad evil person. If you have an evil person that's of every single zone, I wonder if they're just going to have one raid tier for every zone. So, like, the first one will be the Vent tier, and then the next one, we're going to go fight some weird Night Fae boss that's controlling a bunch of the Night Fae creatures. And then we're going to have to go to, you know, the Maldraxxus area and fight some huge, like, a death abomination that was crafted by the jailer, and then we're going to have to go do another one. And then at the end, I would think it would end in the Maw. At least that's what I thought about initially, because usually there's like 4 to 5 raids per expansion, so it would kind of line up if we had 5 raids in the expansion, 1 for each zone, and then 1 for the Maw, 1 to finally finish off the jailer.
Well, if they went with that, then every zone, because we only have technically 3 zones that we started with in BFA.
Well, if you count that there are 2 islands and each island has 3 zones.
Well,
Math is hard.
meeps, yeah. But I mean, if that's what you're going with, every zone that we did in BFA when we first started out from 110 to 120, every zone there would have a raid, but we didn't. We didn't have one in Vol'dun.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
our first tier was in Nazmir. Our second tier was in Zuldazar. But we didn't have one in Vol'dun. We had a dungeon in Vol'dun, but there were still big baddies in Vol'dun.
Cool to have a giant underground snake dungeon in Vol'dun. That would have been really cool.
I thought it would have been great.
I think it's more likely than not that Rise is right with his prediction. I'm certain that the Maw will be our final raid
The
of
jailer.
this expansion.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, yeah, whether or not we actually fight the jailer, the raid will take place in the Maw. If we fight the jailer, it probably won't be to kill him. It'll probably be to subdue him to allow us to leave Shadowlands. Or something like that in order to get us back to the next expansion. Whatever that ends up being, I don't know. Unfortunately, I don't know enough about the lore because I hadn't been reading any of the Shadowlands lore. I've been skipping all of that to read about game mechanics and class design and covenants and conduits and all of that stuff in order to better be, pick my thing for raid. So the only lore that I have read a little bit was just the Castle Nathria stuff, just because we know that that's going to be the first raid tier, and I fucking love vampires. Don't know if that's come up yet, but I do love vampires.
We're all edgelords at heart.
Dude, Nosferatu is a classic. That's all I'm saying. That being said, I think it's more likely than not that Rise is right that we'll probably have one in every Covenant's area. If we don't, I think maybe there'll be 2 tiers in between now and the Maw. And if I had to guess, I couldn't even tell you. Fucking anything. Chromie could show up and be like, "Oh, we're gonna go back to Castle Nathria 1,000 years ago when it was Sunshine Land and Kilthoth was actually alive and not undead." And
No.
it's Blizzard, man. I could not tell you what they're gonna do. I hope fucking not. But also, Kilthoth is cool, so maybe. But yeah, I don't know. It's more than likely Rise is right.
I think we are only going to have 3 major raid tiers and 1 in-between tier. We're going to start off with Nathria. We're going to go to Ardenweald. We're going to skip Bastion.
That'll be the
Mid-tier
half.
is
Oh.
Huh?
No, go ahead.
Our like in between kind of like Crucible of Storms is going to be in Maldraxxus, and then we go to the Maw, finish it off there. We're done.
Okay.
I don't think there there is enough lore in Bastion, but I don't think that there is enough of a big baddie to spawn a raid in Bastion, because the big baddie is already in the Maw.
Right.
And I'm not going to say who because spoilers, but
Yeah.
that's my predictions. I think we're only going to have a total of 3 actual raid tiers and an in-between tier, and they're going to try to push the next expansion on us, because this is going to be the expansion where they really push the every 2-year thing.
Okay.
Could be.
Meeps, you've been awfully quiet.
I don't really typically do
Go on a
predictions.
20-minute rant.
Right. I don't really typically do predictions on what they might have as a raid, because I'm always off, since they never really stick to anything. You go from ICC or Wrath of the Lich King, where there's like 50 plus raid bosses over the entire expansion, to Warlords of Draenor, where there's 22 bosses over the entire expansion. 20 something. And then so yeah, from one expansion to the next, I don't try to predict what kind of what kind of raids we got going on. But the one prediction I will make seems like the obvious one. We're going to go to the Maw as the last tier. But they've also kind of subverted that before with Legion, especially.
Oh, with how we just randomly decided to go to Argus and kill Argus?
Did anyone see that?
Well, like they said when they announced Shadowlands, is they want the big baddie to be up in front and know what you're fighting for right off the bat, rather than hiding everything behind these, shadows and curtains and be like, oh, hey, yeah, this was supposed to be a faction versus faction expansion, but hey, look, it's an old god.
First raid tier, we kill Denathrius. Second raid tier, we kill the jailer. And then third raid tier, Yasharaj is back.
Right.
I don't think I'll ever play again.
We're fighting Yrel.
Well, no, that'll become next expansion. Okay, There's no way to say this that doesn't make me come off as a hipster. I knew N'Zoth was coming in BFA. I knew it 10 years ago. Not that it was in BFA, but I knew where N'Zoth was in the world because I read the books. I'm a huge nerd, so I read all those books. So, at the time of, Old War, there was 3 named old gods that were shown in the world. One was Cthulhu, obviously on Courage, we killed him. The next one was in Old War itself, so that was easy. And then the third one was N'Zoth. He was the third named old one. And where was he? Nobody knows, except in the books they said he's they said that he was located in the southern edges of the Kultiran Isles or something like that, lost with the islands. And that they couldn't pinpoint exactly where he was, but they specifically said the Kultiran Islands. So I knew that when Kultirans and all that came up, I was like, okay, we're getting this off this expansion.
Well, there's still 2 or 3 other old gods that are out there that haven't been named yet. So we've fought in 4.
There is 2 more. There is 2 more. There's Yasharaj or whatever that was in Missum Pandaria, kind of showed up a little bit there. But there was a total of, in the books at least, as far as canon goes, and they may elaborate on this more, but there was allegedly 7 old gods. We have fought 4 of them, so there should be 3 more.
Well, technically, we only fought 3. The 4th one was already dead, and then that's when the Titans were like, "Oh, we shouldn't kill these guys. Let's just lock them away," because of how fucked up Yasharaz did to the planet.
Yeah, and then we went and killed the other 3.
Yeah.
Yeah. Off topic.
Yeah.
Which, it'd be really interesting to see if they take us on some giant loop-de-loop. Because that is one of the things they pushed. Well, we want to show you who you're fighting against right up the door. But, didn't they also kind of do that in BFA? Didn't they kind of say that this expansion was a faction war? And then, the first two raid tiers were faction war-ish, I guess. Not really Gahoon, but
Well,
the Battle for Dzar lore was literally killing King Rusticon. So past that, then all of a sudden they 180'd and went for something totally different. Like, do you guys really think that they would do something like that again?
Well, Gahoon was a Titan-made old god.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But do you think they would go so far off the beaten path of Shadowlands starts, you fight Sire Denathrius, and then maybe the next tier you go and you kill what's his face? You go and kill the jailer, and then suddenly a new Smash Brothers that screen comes up a new challenger has appeared, and then they just throw out a Shara. Do you think they're gonna do something that crazy again that some players didn't see that just flipped?
Actually, now that you say it, I think they will. Because there has been a lot of hints of the quote-unquote the first ones. Nobody knows who the fuck the first ones are. Because the ones are older than the old gods. They are older than the Titans themselves, and the Pantheon, and the Death Pantheon, which is, the Covenant leaders and all that shit, and the Ouroboros.
Are they
lady.
older than the
Void
Void Lords?
Lords?
The Void Lords? I think the Void Lords were the first sentients or whatever, right?
I think
Which I think is, by the way, awesome. We've been getting hints over the last couple expansions about the Void Lords. We are gonna get to fight Void Lords at some point. It's gonna be dope.
I think that's an expansion or two away, but I am very excited for that as well.
I think that the Void Lords are quote-unquote the first ones. Yes.
Yeah, I always kept them differentiated because who knows? It's Blizzard; it could go either way. But I would not be surprised if they are the same thing.
Yeah, because if what you are saying is true, where the Void Lords are, the first sentients to be manifested in this universe, then yeah.
Yeah, I think. Okay, so bringing us back to the last raid, Jailer I think is dope, but I do have a question about the Maw for you guys. How do you guys feel about the Maw? Because
Oh, God.
we obviously know we're gonna end with the Maw. The Jailer is gonna be involved in some way, but I mean, let's be honest. The Maw is completely shit right now, right? There's just nothing.
Yeah, as far as the information I've seen, there's not really much going on in the Maw. But I'd also like to think of as we go through time, and as the Jailer realizes we're here, and then he starts building, an army, and then the Maw starts to expand and more stuff comes in. I do have to say, although, even though it doesn't look like there's a lot, I do like the in particular design choice they went with. It's a really big zone. You have to walk through it, so it feels even bigger. And then suddenly quests will start to pop up while you're there, as if it's not always hustle and bustle active, as just things just happen in the Maw, big events occur and you have to go deal with them, instead of it being for example, I'm going to Nazjatar again, I know these world quests are up, I know exactly what I'm going to be doing. The Maw at least feels like it's a living, breathing entity that maybe isn't just always set in stone with ads in the same spots, with mobs in the same spots.
Yeah, but here's the thing.
Things change.
Let's say I'm out in the world, right, and you're out in the Maw, and you get to the 3 out of 5 point, on your 5-point Richter scale of am I going to get fucked up by the Watcher or not, or the Jailer, and an event happens. You're like, dude, this is cool. Come out here, and I head out there, and now I've got 1 out of 5. You're 3 out of 5. What if that event happens that pushes you all to 5 out of 5? Jailer just fucking deletes you, if it gets spawned at a really bad time for you, that you're just like, well, I can't stay here because if I interact with this, Jailer's gonna kill me. I have to walk away and leave. That feels kind of shitty. Because the longer you're there, the more he's gonna notice you, and as soon as he notices you as at DEFCON 5, you are going to die. He just kills you.
I can actually see that being a good thing though, because it kind of does put a cap on those unfortunately, it puts a cap on those high-end players that just literally sit there and grind all day on islands and get their neck to level 50 when everyone else is at 25. It
I
kind
don't
of
want to be
closes the
punished
gap.
for having no life. All right.
CJ, you'll just have to diversify your no life because there's
We
plenty of
already
stuff
have
to.
a cap on anima gain per week.
But
Why you
there's
gotta cap my no life, man?
Well, it's literally just a daily zone though. That's all it is.
Yeah.
You're
No,
only
I
going to
know.
step in there once per day anyway. So
Yeah.
I see no reason to complain about all these things that people are complaining about.
Yeah, I mean, I can agree with you, I guess, on that point.
and on top of that, it feels unfinished. So
Yeah.
That's what I was getting at when I said like it looks empty and it looks shit. It totally, from everything I've seen, it just looks like you booted up a private server, and it's literally just you alone in the world.
I'm
It just feels
thinking
empty.
they're either going to work on it some between now and release, like there's stuff that they just haven't implemented yet, or they're going to build on it over time, or
I
both.
think
It's probably
building on it over time would be really cool, as well as kind of from like a lore perspective. I'm kind of a lore
Right.
nerd. I don't know if you guys noticed this yet, but
Yeah.
as soon as the jailer notices that we're in the maw, he's gonna be like, "Oh shit, I need to bolster literally everything," and then buildings just start popping up on the next patch, or something like that, or new mobs start coming out, or something like that, to where it's ever changing and ever growing as the expansion goes on, because he knows he's gonna get fucked in the end.
Like here would be a really cool thing that I think could happen. Like you guys remember the opening for Draenor when you push through the gate and then you have to do the huge fight scene and then like the escape to the ship when you're
escaping
fighting,
to
like,
Nan.
army.
Yeah.
Yeah, escaping to Nan. Like, could you imagine if it's just like 9.15 or whatever? So like the patch right before the raid patch in the Jailer's Realm would come out. It's like, oh yeah, something's wrong in the mock, and you go check it out. Like we feel a disturbance, and you go there, and it's just like the Jailer has just assembled a fucking army. And you're just like doing this giant wave fight against like an army of the Jailer's minions, and then like that's like the cue for like the raid opening or something, almost like an old
AQ.
Entourage bell ringing or something like that. I think
That'd be cool.
that could
I'd
be
be
really
so
cool.
down for that.
It makes sense that the Jailer doesn't have an army because we're the only people that can go in and out of the maw, and until we get there, he doesn't really know. So like in 9.0, why would he have an army? He doesn't need it. He doesn't need an all-powerful realm, and then suddenly it's like, oh, you guys have been snooping around for a couple months. Yeah, now I'm going to build up this army, and now there's actually something to do, and now it feels more like a real Suramon or like a real actual end game zone. Because right now, yeah, it does feel barren, but at least I can think that the design of how it is now, as far as how it's supposed to function, seems fine. Again, I don't know if that will stick true, but it seems fine right now, in my opinion. They just need to add more content, and I really hope it evolves into something better than it already is.
I agree.
Well, it's getting pretty late. We've got a lot more to go over, but I think it's going to have to wait for part 2.
Yeah.
We've still got Torghast. That's the first time Torghast has been mentioned. So we've got that to talk about. The grinds,
Soul Finds, the grinds, Torghast, all the legendaries.
Right?
Oh man, yeah, there's a lot.
Covenants and conduits. Yeah.
But for now, we're gonna go ahead and start winding down, and just want to know from you guys. The Shadowlands information has been available now for a few months, and don't we know it? Because all of us have been scraping every bit of information. My brain hurts. I'm so ready to not know, like just let all this shit trickle out of my head. But what is the coolest or most interesting or most important change that you've seen for Shadowlands?
I think the most important thing that they have been adding is some of the options for player choice. I think having the Great Vault, where you can choose what gear you get based on what kind of content you're doing, instead of just doing one piece of content and sitting in it, you can farm it up. You can get a lot more options. It gives you the agency, is really, really cool. And as a little side caveat, I think that the leveling system and how they approach the leveling system through this current iteration, like from 50 to 60, I think it all looks really well and really polished. So I'm very excited to level through it. I'm excited to have ults through it. And then I think just the player agency that we're getting primarily in the Great Vault is just going to be, bar none, one of the best changes to the game.
I think I kind of have to echo that one for myself. The player choice is the number one thing. And that's just the whole thing. So whether it's the vaults or whatever, I like all of that. The only thing about the player choice that I don't like is currently power being associated with covenants, which we didn't get to talk about too much aside from the Mythic Plus aspect, but
Right.
we'll save that for part 2. But I think being able to choose your covenant based on what you thematically want to choose, I would totally go Venthyr, but it's useless for Brewmaster, so I'm not going to. I love vampires. I don't know if that came up, but I feel like that choice has been taken away from me because there's power associated with it, and the power for my class and spec that I've chosen is going to be useless. So unfortunately, that won't be doable. But the vaults, I think, is... I mentioned it earlier. It's one of my favorite things that they've done. The more content you do, the more options that you get. If all the options are useless, take the currency, and you're good. Expanding on that a little bit, the legendary system is like Legion in the sense that you get a legendary. It's going to change the way your character plays to a very small, minor degree, but this time you get to choose. Yeah, it's going to be, somewhat random, I guess, how you actually get the legendaries, and we'll talk about that next week in part 2, but the fact is, like, when you make your legendary, it's you crafting it. So you get to choose what you want, and that just goes back to the player choice. I think that is awesome. I love the amount of choices that we're making. Holy crap, it just got bright in front of Rise, and yeah, that's... The player choice, for me, absolutely, hands down, bar none, my favorite. It's the choices.
I think...
And vampires.
Do you like vampires or something?
I
Yes,
didn't
I
know.
do. Thank you for asking.
Okay. My favorite part of Shadowlands is the unpruning. I think it's bringing a lot back of more of that class identity that a lot of people strive for, which I want to feel like a mage when I'm playing a mage rather than, oh, I'm a warlock, but I'm a mage. I don't get it. I think that right there is going to be my favorite of literally everything, as well as all of the new lore that's going to be coming along, all of the quote-unquote rehash lore, especially with Kael'thas coming back, and quite a few others that I will not mention right now coming back. Even though I'm not going to read any of the freaking quests as I'm going, but I'm 99% sure Noble will have something up on the interwebs that I can listen to as I'm grinding. Those are going to be my 2 most favorite, I think.
Mine's easy. I'm glad that there's going to be no corruptions and no war forging. Man.
You're not a fan of borrowed power or RNG, huh?
I mean, it's still going to be there. They're replacing it with other things that we.
I like the idea of borrowed power, honestly. I'm probably part of the 1% that think it's actually cool because every expansion it changes your character and how it plays.
I just don't like the extent of the borrowed power.
Yeah, with how this expansion went, yeah, I would definitely agree
Legion
with that. I didn't really play in the beginning of Legion, so I didn't...
Artifact weapons were cool, but
yeah.
They became everything.
Well, yeah.
I mean, yeah, they're that powerful, but when you have borrowed power on that level... You know what? We're getting off topic. We'll talk about this later, Nick.
Do you want to take this downstairs?
Absolutely. Let's get beer.
All right.
I'm almost out of my vodka and Slurpee.
Yeah, same.
If you've listened this long, feel free to comment on the YouTube video that's going to be uploaded probably tomorrow. You can find us at Simply WoW Podcast channel. But we want to hear from you. Like the question I just asked them, information has been available for a few months. What's the coolest thing or most interesting thing or most important change that you have seen in the Shadowlands? We want to hear from you. And you can find us live Friday nights at 7 p.m. on 7 p.m. PST on Twitch at twitch.tv/dsmeeps. If you want to watch later, you can find the podcast on YouTube every week on the Simply WoW Podcast channel. And for audio only, you can find us on Anchor or Spotify. Have a good night and keep it simple.